When Daniel Brooks opened his front door for a blind date he'd been dreading for weeks, he expected awkward small talk and polite excuses. What he got instead were 4 words that shattered 5 years of carefully constructed silence. "You saved my daughter's life." The woman standing on his porch, a stranger named Rachel Miller, shouldn't have known his secret. Nobody did. The anonymous decision he'd made in his darkest hour was supposed to stay buried with his grief. But somehow, impossibly, his past had just knocked on his door wearing a summer dress and knowing eyes that saw straight through every wall he'd built. If you're enjoying this story, please hit the like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this tale travels. Now, let's begin where secrets refuse to stay hidden. The Saturday morning sun filtered through the kitchen window of Daniel Brooks's modest 2-story home in suburban Portland, casting warm geometric patterns across the breakfast table where his 8-year-old son Marcus sat demolishing a stack of chocolate chip pancakes. Daniel stood at the sink, rinsing dishes with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been doing it alone for 5 years, half listening to Marcus's animated recap of last night's sleepover at his best friend Tyler's house. And then Tyler's dad let us stay up until almost midnight watching that space movie, the one with the robots, and there was this part where, "Dad, are you even listening?" Daniel turned, dish rag still in hand, and offered an apologetic smile. "Sorry, bud, the space movie with robots. You stayed up way too late, and I'm going to have words with Tyler's dad about corrupting my son's bedtime routine." Marcus grinned, syrup glistening on his chin. "You're not mad, though." "I'm never mad at you." Daniel crossed to the table and wiped his son's face with a napkin, earning an exaggerated groan of protest. "But I am wondering if you're going to have enough energy for soccer practice this afternoon." "Dad, I'm 8. I have infinite energy." Marcus bounced in his chair as if to prove the point. "Besides, Coach says I'm getting really good at corner kicks." Daniel felt that familiar tightness in his chest, the one that came whenever he watched his son growing up, becoming more confident, more independent, more like Sarah had been. His late wife's absence was a constant presence in their lives, woven into every mundane moment, every milestone. She should have been here to see Marcus score his first goal, lose his first tooth, start 3rd grade with that nervous excitement that made him talk twice as fast. "Your mom would be so proud of you," Daniel said quietly, then immediately regretted it when he saw the flicker of sadness cross Marcus's face. "I wish she could see me play," Marcus said, his voice smaller now. Daniel squeezed his son's shoulder. "She can, kiddo. Somehow, I know she can." The moment hung between them, familiar and heavy, until Marcus's natural resilience kicked in and he brightened again. "So are you excited about your date today?" Daniel groaned and returned to the sink. "I'm not calling it a date. Grandma Joan called it a date. She said it was high time you got back out there." Marcus did a remarkably accurate impression of Daniel's mother-in-law's insistent tone. "Grandma Joan needs to mind her own business," Daniel muttered, but without heat. Joan meant well. They all did. His friends, his family, even his colleagues at the architectural firm where he worked. 5 years was apparently the socially acceptable statute of limitations on grief, the point at which well-meaning people felt entitled to start pushing you back into the world of the living. The truth was, Daniel had agreed to this coffee meeting mostly to get everyone off his back. His college roommate Dave had been pestering him for months about meeting his wife's friend, Rachel, a nurse at the same hospital where Dave's wife worked. "She's great, man. Smart, funny, been through some tough stuff herself. Just coffee, low pressure. What's the worst that could happen?" Daniel could think of several worst-case scenarios, all of them involving awkward silences and the inevitable moment when he'd have to explain that he wasn't really ready for this, that his heart still felt like a locked room where Sarah's memory lived untouched, that the idea of laughing with someone new felt like a betrayal of everything he'd lost. But he'd agreed anyway, because that's what you did when enough people told you it was time. You went through the motions, you showed up, you tried. "What time is she coming?" Marcus asked. Daniel glanced at the microwave clock, 10:17. "About an hour, which means you need to finish breakfast and get ready for practice." "Can I meet her?" "Absolutely not." "Why not?" "Because it's just coffee, not a family introduction. And because you," Daniel poked his son gently in the ribs, are a distraction. Marcus giggled and squirmed away. I'll be on my best behavior, I promise. That's what worries me. Daniel ushered him toward the stairs. Go brush your teeth and get your soccer stuff ready. Tyler's mom is picking you up at 11. As Marcus thundered up the stairs with the subtle grace of a small elephant, Daniel leaned against the kitchen counter and took a deep breath. The house felt too quiet suddenly, the way it always did when he had time to think. He'd gotten good at filling the silence, with work, with Marcus's activities, with the endless logistics of single parenthood, but moments like this still caught him off guard. His phone buzzed, a text from Dave. Good luck today, man. Just be yourself. And remember, Rachel's nervous too. Daniel typed back. That makes one of us. I'm not nervous. I'm dreading it. Dave's response came immediately. Same thing, dumbass. You got this. Daniel smiled despite himself and pocketed the phone. He looked around the kitchen, suddenly seeing it through a stranger's eyes. It was clean, but cluttered, lived in. Marcus's crayon drawings covered the refrigerator. A stack of architectural blueprints sat on the counter where Daniel had been working late last night. Sarah's favorite coffee mug still hung on its hook by the window, the one with the faded logo from the hospital where she'd done her residency. Daniel had tried putting it away once, 2 years ago, and Marcus had cried for an hour. Now it just lived there, a small shrine neither of them acknowledged but both needed. The doorbell rang at exactly 11:20. Punctual to the point of making Daniel wonder if Rachel had been sitting in her car waiting for the right moment. He'd changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on jeans and a button-down shirt that Marcus had declared dad nice, not weird nice, whatever that meant. His hair was still damp from a shower, and he realized as he walked to the door that his heart was actually pounding. Just coffee. Low pressure. Get through an hour, and everyone would stop nagging him. He opened the door. The woman standing on his porch was somewhere in her mid-30s, with shoulder-length brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and eyes that were an unusual shade of gray-green. She wore a sundress with a light cardigan, and she was smiling, but there was something tentative about it, like she was bracing herself for disappointment. "Hi," she said. "I'm Rachel. You must be Daniel." "That's me." He stepped back. "Come on in. I just need to grab my keys and—" She was staring at him now, really staring, and her smile had frozen into something that looked almost like shock. The color drained from her face. Daniel stopped mid-sentence. "Are you okay?" Rachel took a small step forward, her eyes locked on his face with an intensity that made him deeply uncomfortable. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, trembling with emotion he couldn't identify. "I know you." Daniel's stomach dropped. For a wild second, he wondered if they'd met before and he'd somehow forgotten, though he was certain they hadn't. "I don't think we've— You saved my child's life." The words hit him like a physical blow. The world seemed to tilt sideways. The pleasant spring afternoon, the birdsong from the neighbor's yard, Marcus's voice calling something from upstairs. It all receded into white noise. No. She couldn't know. Nobody knew. It was anonymous. It was supposed to be anonymous. I think you have me confused with someone else." His voice sounded wrong even to his own ears, too tight, too defensive. Rachel shook her head slowly, and tears were forming in her eyes now. 5 years ago. You donated blood stem cells. They told me the donor was anonymous, that I'd never know who saved Emma, but I've worked in oncology for 12 years. I know what those scars look like. She was looking at his wrist now, at the small faded marks on his right arm where the needles had gone in during the apheresis procedure. I've seen them on hundreds of donors, and your blood type, Dave's wife mentioned you were O negative. Emma needed a specific HLA match, and the odds— Her voice broke. The odds were impossibly small, but someone matched, someone agreed, and my daughter lived. Daniel felt like he couldn't breathe. His hand instinctively moved to cover the scars, a futile gesture. "Rachel, I'm not supposed to know," she continued quickly, wiping at her eyes. "The registry protects donor anonymity for good reason, but I've thought about you every single day for 5 years. I've wondered who you were, what your life was like, if you had any idea what you'd done. I wrote you letters I could never send, and now you're Dave's friend, and you're standing here, and I—" She pressed her hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. "I'm sorry. This is completely inappropriate. I shouldn't have said anything. I should turn around and leave, and we can both pretend this never. Daniel's phone erupted with sound, the ringtone he'd assigned to Marcus's school, an obnoxious alarm that couldn't be ignored. He grabbed it reflexively, saw Lincoln Elementary on the screen, and his entire body went cold with the particular dread every parent knows. "This is Daniel Brooks." "Mr. Brooks, this is Susan Chen from the nurse's office. Marcus is fine, but there's been an incident on the playground. He fell from the monkey bars and hit his head. He's conscious and talking, but we need you to come pick him up immediately. We're recommending he be seen by a doctor as a precaution." The world snapped back into sharp focus. Marcus, injured. Nothing else mattered. "I'm on my way. 10 minutes. He was already grabbing his keys from the hook by the door, his mind racing through protocols, concussion symptoms, emergency room wait times, whether he should call ahead. Rachel was already moving. "I'll drive. You're in no state to drive safely. Where's the school?" "You don't have to." "I'm a pediatric nurse," she said firmly, already heading for the silver Honda in the driveway. "And your hands are shaking. Give me the address, now." Daniel looked down and realized she was right. His hands were trembling. He climbed into the passenger seat, gave her the address, and she pulled out with smooth efficiency, already asking questions in a calm, clinical voice that cut through his panic. "How old is Marcus?" 8, 9 in July. "Any history of seizures or head injuries?" "No, nothing. He's healthy. He's always been healthy." "What did they say about his symptoms? Is he confused, nauseous?" "They said he's conscious and talking. That's all they said." Daniel pressed his palm against his forehead. "I should have been there. He was at Tyler's last night, and I should have skipped soccer practice today. Should have—" "Daniel." Rachel's voice was gentle but firm. "Kids fall. It happens. You didn't do anything wrong." They drove in silence for a moment. Daniel watched the familiar streets blur past, his mind still reeling from the impossible convergence of events. 20 minutes ago, he'd been worried about making small talk over coffee. Now his son was hurt, and the woman driving him to the school was claiming he'd saved her daughter's life, and everything felt like it was happening to someone else. "How did you know?" he asked quietly. "Really? The scars could be from anything." Rachel kept her eyes on the road. "I didn't know for sure until you reacted the way you did. But I've had a feeling since Dave first mentioned your name. Daniel Brooks, architect, widower, 1 son, O-negative blood type. Dave's wife told me you'd lost your wife 5 years ago, and I did the math. Emma got sick 5 years ago. You donated right around the time—" She paused. "Around the time your wife died." Daniel's throat tightened. He hadn't talked about that time, truly talked about it, with anyone. Not his therapist, not his family, not even Dave, who'd sat with him through the worst of it. Sarah had been sick for 6 months. Pancreatic cancer, diagnosed too late, moving too fast. The oncologist had given her a year. She'd made it 8 months. Near the end, when the hospice nurse had suggested they start saying their goodbyes, Daniel had felt like he was drowning. The house was full of people, family, friends, colleagues, all offering condolences and casseroles and utterly useless platitudes about how Sarah was in a better place now. He'd needed to do something, anything, that felt like life instead of death. The bone marrow registry had sent him an email 2 days before Sarah died. He'd signed up years earlier during a donor drive at work and forgotten about it. The email said he was a potential match for someone who needed stem cells. Would he be willing to donate? He'd said yes without hesitation. Had driven to the clinic the day after Sarah's funeral while his mother-in-law watched Marcus. Had sat in a chair for 5 hours while his blood cycled through a machine that filtered out stem cells and returned the rest. The nurse had told him he was saving someone's life, probably a child. Had asked if he wanted to write a letter to them. He'd declined. It didn't feel like heroism. It felt like the only thing he could control in a world where cancer took his wife and left him alone with a 3-year-old who kept asking when mommy was coming home. "I wasn't trying to save anyone," Daniel said finally, his voice rough. "I was just trying to feel like the world wasn't entirely pointless." Rachel pulled into the school parking lot and killed the engine. She turned to face him, and her eyes held a depth of understanding that made something crack in his chest. "You did both," she said softly. whether you meant to or not. They walked into Lincoln Elementary together, Rachel slightly ahead, moving with the purposeful efficiency of someone who'd navigated countless hospital corridors. The school nurse, Susan Chen, met them at the office door with Marcus sitting on a chair behind her, holding an ice pack to his forehead and looking more annoyed than hurt. "Dad!" Marcus brightened when he saw Daniel, then noticed Rachel. "Who's that?" "This is Rachel. She's a nurse. How are you feeling, bud?" "Fine. I told Mrs. Chen I'm fine. It's just a bump." Marcus lifted the ice pack to show a small red welt on his forehead. "Tyler dared me to skip 3 bars and I almost made it." Susan Chen gave Daniel an apologetic look. "School policy requires parent pickup for any head injury. He's been alert and responsive the whole time, no signs of concussion, but you'll want to monitor him for the next 24 hours. Rachel was already crouching in front of Marcus, gently tilting his head to examine the injury. "Hey there, Marcus. I'm going to ask you some questions, okay? What's your full name?" "Marcus James Brooks." "Good. What day is it?" "Saturday. Soccer practice day." "Do you remember falling?" "Yeah, I grabbed the bar wrong and my hand slipped. It was stupid." He looked at Daniel. "Am I in trouble?" "No, kiddo, just scared me." Daniel's voice was still shaky. Rachel pulled a small pen light from her purse and checked Marcus's pupils. "Follow the light with your eyes. Don't move your head." She watched carefully, then nodded. "Pupils equal and reactive." "Marcus, does your head hurt?" "A little, like a medium hurt, not a bad hurt." "Do you feel dizzy or sick to your stomach?" "No." "Did you black out at all, even for a second?" "No, I was awake the whole time. It was actually kind of cool. Everyone came running over." Marcus grinned, then winced and touched his forehead. "Ow." Rachel stood and turned to Daniel and Susan. "He's fine. Normal bump, no signs of concussion. Keep the ice on it for another 15 minutes, and watch for unusual drowsiness, vomiting, or confusion over the next day. If anything concerns you, take him to urgent care, but honestly, he'll probably have a colorful bruise and a great story for his friends." Daniel felt the tension drain from his shoulders. "Thank you. It's what I do." Rachel smiled at Marcus. "You got lucky, kiddo. Next time maybe don't skip 3 bars?" "That's what Mrs. Chen said." "Mrs. Chen is smart." They signed the necessary paperwork and walked back to Rachel's car, Marcus chattering about the fall and soccer practice and whether he'd be allowed to play with a battle wound. Daniel caught Rachel's eye over his son's head, and she was smiling with the particular warmth of someone who understood exactly how terrifying parental panic could be. "Still want to get coffee?" Daniel asked when they reached the car. "Or has this been enough excitement for one day?" Rachel checked her watch. "I have to be at the hospital for a shift at 4, so we'd be cutting it close," but she hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "How about I follow you home? I'd like to sit with Marcus for a bit, make sure that bump doesn't develop into anything concerning. And maybe we can talk. Really talk. If you want to." Daniel looked at his son, then back at Rachel, at the woman who'd appeared on his doorstep, knowing his deepest secret, who'd driven him to his son's school without hesitation, who was looking at him now with something that might have been hope or might have been fear. He couldn't quite tell. "Yeah," he said, "I think I'd like that." The drive back to the house felt different than the frantic journey to the school. Marcus sat in the back seat of Daniel's car. Rachel had insisted on following rather than having Daniel leave his vehicle at the school, narrating the fall in increasingly dramatic detail. Daniel listened with half his attention, the other half still processing the impossible reality of what had happened. Rachel Miller, the nurse whose daughter he'd saved, here, now, in his life. Back at the house, Daniel settled Marcus on the couch with a fresh ice pack and turned on a movie, ignoring his son's protests that he was fine and didn't need to rest. Rachel stood in the kitchen doorway, seeming suddenly uncertain now that the crisis had passed. "Coffee?" Daniel offered. "For real this time?" "That would be nice." He moved through the familiar ritual of making coffee, hyper-aware of her presence in his space. She didn't sit down, instead wandering slowly around the kitchen, taking in the drawings on the fridge, the organized chaos of their lives. "Your son is lovely," she said quietly. "He has your eyes. He has his mother's smile." Daniel poured 2 mugs and handed her one. She died 5 years ago, pancreatic cancer, but I guess you already knew that. Dave's wife mentioned it. I'm so sorry. Everyone's sorry. It doesn't change anything. The words came out harsher than he intended. He softened his tone. I'm sorry. I don't talk about it much. You don't have to talk about it at all. Rachel cradled the mug in both hands. This is already so far beyond what I should have said or done. I ambushed you. I violated your privacy. You recognized a scar and put pieces together. That's not a violation. It feels like one. She met his eyes. The registry protects donor anonymity because people need to know their choice won't come back to complicate their lives. You made an incredibly generous decision during the worst time of your life, and you deserve to have that be anonymous. Instead, I showed up and you saved my son today. Daniel set down his mug. You kept me calm when I was panicking. You knew exactly what to do, so maybe we're even. Rachel's laugh was shaky. That's not how this works. Then how does it work? She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. 5 years ago, my daughter Emma was 4 years old. She started getting tired all the time, bruising easily. We thought it was just normal kid stuff until her preschool teacher noticed she was pale and called me. I took her to the pediatrician, who sent us immediately to the ER. By that night, we had a diagnosis: acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He didn't know much about childhood cancers, but he knew enough to understand what that diagnosis meant. The next 2 years were hell, Rachel continued. Chemotherapy, radiation, endless hospital stays. Emma lost her hair 3 times. She missed her 5th birthday party because her counts were too low and she was in isolation. Her father, my ex-husband, couldn't handle it, left us 6 months into treatment, said he couldn't watch his daughter die. Her voice hardened. Except she wasn't dying, she was fighting, and she needed him, and he left. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm better off without him. Emma's better off without him. Rachel took a sip of coffee. But the cancer came back. After a year of remission, it came back, and this time the doctor said her only chance was a stem cell transplant. They tested her brother, my older son Jake, but he wasn't a match. Neither was I. They searched the registry and found you. A perfect match. 10 out of 10 markers. The doctor said it was like finding a needle in a cosmic haystack. I didn't do anything special, Daniel said quietly. I signed up at a work event years before. They called. I said yes. That's all. That's not all. Rachel's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You said yes when you were grieving. You said yes when you had every reason to say no. You showed up and sat in that chair and gave part of yourself to save a child you'd never met. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How many people sign up and then back out when they actually get called? Daniel didn't know what to say. He'd never thought about it that way. The decision to donate had been instinctive, almost desperate. He'd needed to do something good in a world that felt cruel and random. How is she now? He asked. Emma? Rachel's face transformed, grief shifting to something that looked like wonder. She's 9 years old. She's in 4th grade. She plays soccer and violin, though not very well at either. She wants to be a veterinarian or a chef, changes her mind weekly. She's healthy, strong. She has a life. Rachel's voice broke on the last word. Because of you, she has a life. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of it settling between them. In the living room, Marcus laughed at something in his movie, the sound bright and uncomplicated. I need you to understand something, Rachel said finally. I didn't come here today planning to say anything. When Dave's wife suggested setting us up, she had no idea about the connection. It was just a coincidence, 2 single parents who might get along. I almost said no because I was worried. What if he was the donor? What if I recognized something? But I thought the odds were impossibly small, and I've been alone for a long time, and She trailed off, then shook her head. And then I saw you, and I knew. I didn't mean to know, but I did. I'm glad you told me, Daniel said, and was surprised to find he meant it. I've never thought about the person who got my donation. The registry gives you the option to exchange anonymous letters after a year, but I never did. It felt too raw. I was still drowning in my own grief, and I couldn't handle more emotion. He paused. But I've wondered sometimes, if it worked, if they survived. She survived. Rachel smiled through tears. She thrived. I'd like to meet her, Daniel said impulsively, then immediately wondered if that was too much, too fast. I mean, if that's appropriate. If you think she'd love that. Rachel's smile widened. She calls you her cell buddy. That's what the transplant coordinator told her, that someone out there shared their cells with her so she could get better. She writes you letters sometimes. Did you know that? Letters she knows she can't send. The registry said donors and recipients can choose to meet after a year if both parties agree, but I never reached out because I didn't want to intrude on your life. And now, she laughed, a sound caught between joy and disbelief. Now you're here, and this is completely surreal. Daniel found himself laughing too, tension breaking into something lighter. I agreed to a blind date and got hit with the emotional equivalent of a freight train. Yeah, surreal covers it. We could still call it a date, Rachel offered tentatively. The world's strangest first date, but technically we're two single parents having coffee in your kitchen. That counts, right? That counts. Daniel felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Not the heavy grief he'd carried for 5 years, but something warmer. Hope, maybe. Or possibility. For the record, this is going better than I expected. What were you expecting? Awkward small talk, uncomfortable silences, both of us looking for excuses to leave. To be fair, we had the uncomfortable silence. You just powered through it by having a family emergency. Marcus has great timing, Daniel agreed. They smiled at each other, and for the first time since Sarah died, Daniel felt something shift in the locked room of his heart. Not opening, not yet, but maybe acknowledging that the door existed, that it could be opened, that there might be something beyond grief worth reaching for. Tell me about Emma, he said. And your son. I want to know about your family. Rachel's face lit up in a way that made her beautiful. Jake is 14 and thinks he's too cool for everything, but he'd take a bullet for his little sister. He practically lived at the hospital during her treatment. Emma is 9 going on 90, wise beyond her years because she's seen too much too young, but she still believes in magic and fairy tales. She draws constantly, usually pictures of rainbows and unicorns and families that are always smiling. Families plural? She draws different versions. Sometimes it's me and her and Jake. Sometimes she adds her dad back in, even though he's been gone for years. Sometimes, Rachel hesitated. Sometimes she draws a mystery person, someone she says is her angel. I think she means you, her cell buddy. Daniel felt his throat tighten. I'm no angel. You don't get to decide that. She does. Rachel checked her watch and sighed. I need to start heading to the hospital soon. My shift starts at 4 and I can't be late. But I don't want to leave. She searched for words. This is the strangest, most wonderful coffee date I've ever had, and we've barely talked about anything normal people talk about on dates. What do normal people talk about? Jobs? Hobbies? Favorite movies? Rachel laughed. Not childhood cancer and grief and stem cell transplants. Overrated topics anyway. Daniel walked her toward the door, then paused. Can I ask you something? Anything. When you realized who I was, when you saw me standing there, were you scared? Angry? Did you wish you hadn't come? Rachel considered the question carefully. I was shocked, overwhelmed, grateful beyond words. But scared or angry? No. If anything, I felt... She paused, looking for the right word. Complete. Like a mystery I'd been living with for 5 years suddenly had an answer. Like the universe had connected dots I didn't even know existed. Daniel nodded slowly. I felt something similar. Not quite that. I'm still processing. But when you said those words, when you said I'd saved your daughter, he took a breath. For 5 years, I've felt like I was just going through the motions, taking care of Marcus, doing my job, existing, but not really living, and hearing that something I did mattered, that it changed someone's entire world. It's the first time in a long time that I felt like my life has purpose beyond just surviving. Rachel reached out and squeezed his hand, the gesture brief but warm. Your life has always had purpose, Daniel, but I'm glad I could remind you of that. She said goodbye to Marcus, who barely looked up from his movie, then walked to her car. Daniel stood in the doorway watching her go, feeling like the world had tilted on its axis and he was still finding his balance. His phone buzzed, a text from Rachel. "Thank you for the strangest, best coffee date of my life. I'd like to do it again sometime. Maybe somewhere that serves actual coffee next time?" He typed back, "I'd like that." And Rachel, "Thank you for telling me. About Emma. About everything." Her response came immediately. "Thank you for being someone worth finding." Daniel pocketed his phone and went to check on Marcus, who had fallen asleep on the couch despite his earlier insistence that he was fine. Daniel adjusted the ice pack, turned off the TV, and sat in the armchair across from his son, just watching him breathe. 5 years ago, in the depths of his grief, he'd made a decision that felt small and necessary, a way to create some light in overwhelming darkness. He'd given part of himself to a stranger, asking nothing in return, expecting nothing in return. And now that decision had circled back to him in the form of a woman with gray-green eyes and a daughter who drew angels and called him her cell buddy. The universe, it seemed, had a strange sense of timing. Daniel picked up his phone and opened his photo gallery, scrolling back 5 years to the pictures from that time. There were only a few. He'd barely been able to function, let alone document anything. But there was one from the donation day, taken by the nurse who'd managed his apheresis. Daniel sitting in the clinic chair, pale and exhausted, with thin tubes connecting his arms to the humming machine. He'd deleted it a dozen times and kept restoring it, unable to fully let go of that moment. He'd been 29 years old, newly widowed, terrified, and lost. He'd sat in that chair feeling like he was falling through space with nothing to hold on to. Now he was 34. Still widowed, still terrified sometimes, but not quite as lost. And the decision he'd made in that clinic, the one that felt desperate and small, had saved a 4-year-old girl and given her mother hope and brought them both into his life at exactly the moment when he'd finally, reluctantly, agreed to try living again. Maybe the universe didn't have a strange sense of timing after all. Maybe it had perfect timing, and Daniel just hadn't been able to see it until now. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Rachel. "I forgot to ask. Does Marcus play soccer on a team? Jake plays too. Maybe they could meet. Slowly if you want. No pressure. Just a thought." Daniel smiled and typed back, "Let's talk about it. One step at a time, but yes, I'd like that." He looked at his sleeping son, at the small bruise forming on his forehead, at the peaceful expression on his face. Marcus looked so much like Sarah in sleep, the same delicate features, the same slight smile even in dreams. "Your mom would have liked Rachel," Daniel whispered to his son. "She would have liked this whole crazy story." And for the first time in 5 years, Daniel felt like Sarah's memory wasn't a weight he carried, but a presence that walked beside him, approving, encouraging, whispering that it was okay to open that locked door just a crack, that there was room for grief and hope to coexist, that one quiet act of kindness could echo forward in ways he'd never imagined. Outside, the afternoon sun moved across the sky, and Daniel sat with his sleeping son, his phone warm in his hand, thinking about gray-green eyes and second chances, and the strange, beautiful way the world sometimes rewarded decisions made in darkness with light that came when you least expected it. He didn't know what would happen next, didn't know if this connection with Rachel would grow into something real or fade into awkward politeness, didn't know if he was ready for any of it. But for the first time in a very long time, Daniel Brooks wanted to find out. The bruise on Marcus's forehead bloomed into a spectacular purple-yellow over the next 24 hours, which he wore with the pride of a warrior displaying his battle scars. Daniel monitored him carefully, watching for signs of confusion or nausea that never came. By Sunday evening, Marcus was begging to go back to school Monday just so he could show everyone his epic injury. "It's not that epic," Daniel said, examining the bruise under the bathroom light. "I've seen worse. Tyler said it looks like a galaxy. Can I take a picture for show and tell?" "Absolutely not." Marcus groaned the way only an 8-year-old denied social glory could groan. Daniel smiled and ruffled his son's hair, then sent him to brush his teeth. Alone in the hallway, Daniel pulled out his phone and stared at the text conversation with Rachel. They'd exchanged a few messages over the weekend. Nothing heavy, just small updates about Marcus's recovery and Emma's excitement about maybe meeting her cell buddy someday. The conversation felt easy, natural, which somehow made it more terrifying. Monday morning arrived with the chaos of school preparation. Marcus couldn't find his math homework, insisted his lucky soccer shirt was the only one he could possibly wear, even though it was in the laundry, and spent 10 minutes arguing that the bruise definitely made him look cool enough to bend the dress code rules. Daniel navigated it all with practiced efficiency, got his son fed and dressed, and out the door with 30 seconds to spare before the bus arrived. The house felt impossibly quiet after Marcus left. Daniel made himself coffee and sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, intending to review the blueprints for the community center project his firm was designing. Instead, he found himself staring at the space where Rachel had stood 3 days ago, holding her coffee mug and telling him about Emma's drawings of angels. His phone buzzed. Rachel's name appeared on the screen with a message that made his heart skip. "I know this is probably too soon and completely inappropriate, but Emma has been asking about you nonstop since I told her I met someone who might be her cell buddy. She wants to meet you. No pressure. I can tell her we need to wait, that it's too fast. But I promised I'd ask." Daniel read the message 3 times. Too fast. Definitely too fast. He'd agreed to coffee, not to meeting the child whose life he'd saved. That felt like crossing a line into something he wasn't ready for, something that would make all of this impossibly real and complicated. He typed, "Can I think about it?" Rachel's response came immediately. "Of course, take all the time you need. I'm sorry for pushing." "You're not pushing, I just need to process." "I understand. Really?" Daniel set down his phone and stared at his cold coffee. What was he afraid of exactly? Meeting a 9-year-old girl who'd survived cancer? Seeing the tangible proof that his decision 5 years ago had meant something? Or was he afraid that meeting Emma would break something open inside him that he'd been working very hard to keep sealed? His phone rang, Dave's number. "Tell me you didn't completely screw up the date," Dave said by way of greeting. Daniel laughed despite himself. "Hello to you too. I'm serious, man. Laura's been on me all weekend wanting to know how it went. She really likes Rachel, thinks you two would be great together. So, did you at least get through coffee without talking about architecture for 3 hours?" We didn't actually make it to coffee. Marcus fell at school and Rachel drove me to pick him up. "Oh, damn, is he okay?" "He's fine." Bumped his head, earned bragging rights, but Rachel stayed and helped. She's a pediatric nurse, so she knew exactly what to do. Daniel paused, weighing how much to say. "Dave, did Laura tell Rachel anything specific about me? About my medical history?" "Just the basics. Widower, 1 kid, architect." "Why?" "Rachel knew things. About a medical donation I made 5 years ago. She figured out I was the stem cell donor who saved her daughter's life." The silence on the other end stretched so long Daniel thought the call had dropped. "Dave? Are you messing with me right now? Because that's not funny." "I'm completely serious. Rachel's daughter Emma had leukemia 5 years ago. She needed a stem cell transplant. I was the anonymous donor. Rachel recognized me." "Holy..." Dave exhaled sharply. "That's impossible. The odds of that are like winning the lottery while getting struck by lightning. Apparently cosmic haystack statistics apply." "And you're sure? Like 100% sure?" "Rachel's a nurse who's worked in oncology for years. She recognized the donation scars on my wrist. She knew my blood type. The timeline matches perfectly." Daniel rubbed his face. "It's real, Dave. Impossibly real." "That's..." Dave seemed to be struggling for words. "That's the most insane thing I've ever heard. And I once watched a guy juggle chainsaws while riding a unicycle, so that's saying something." "She wants me to meet Emma, the daughter. Says she's been asking about me since Rachel told her." "Are you going to?" "I don't know." Daniel stood and paced the kitchen. "Part of me wants to. Part of me is terrified. What if meeting her makes everything too complicated? What if I can't handle it?" "Daniel, listen to me." Dave's voice turned serious. "You've spent 5 years being the world's most dedicated single dad, throwing yourself into work and Marcus's life and basically existing on autopilot. Now you've got a chance at something real with someone who already knows the worst thing that ever happened to you, who gets it, who's been through her own version of hell. And yeah, it's complicated. Yeah, it's scary. But when has anything worth having ever been simple?" Since when did you become a philosopher? Since my idiot best friend finally got a second chance and is about to talk himself out of it. Dave's tone softened. I'm not saying marry the woman tomorrow. I'm saying meet the kid. See what happens. Let yourself feel something other than grief and responsibility for 5 minutes. Daniel knew Dave was right, which made it more annoying. I hate when you make sense. I know, it's my best quality. Dave paused. For what it's worth, Laura says Rachel's been alone for 4 years. Her ex abandoned her right when Emma got sick. She's raised 2 kids basically single-handedly while working full-time and managing a childhood cancer crisis. She's tough as hell, Daniel. And if she's willing to put herself out there after all that, maybe you should be too. They talked for a few more minutes before Dave had to go. Daniel sat with the silence again, his friend's words echoing in his head. Finally, he picked up his phone and typed, I'd like to meet Emma. When works for you? Rachel's response came fast enough that she must have been staring at her phone. Really? You're sure? I'm terrified, but yes. How about Wednesday after school? We could meet at the park near the hospital. Emma loves the playground there, and it's neutral territory. Casual. Jake will be at basketball practice, so it would just be me and her. Daniel's finger hovered over the keyboard. Wednesday was 2 days away. Not enough time to prepare emotionally, but probably more than enough time to talk himself out of it entirely if he waited longer. Wednesday works. What time? 4 o'clock? I get off shift at 3 and can pick her up from school. 4 o'clock at Memorial Park. I'll be there. Thank you, Daniel. This means everything to her. To both of us. He set down his phone and noticed his hands were shaking again, the same way they'd shaken when the school called about Marcus. Fear and anticipation twisted together in his chest. He was going to meet the girl he'd saved, the child who existed because of a decision he'd made in his darkest moment. The thought was almost too big to hold. Tuesday passed in a blur of work and routine. Daniel threw himself into the community center project, refining the design until his colleague Anna had to physically remove the stylus from his hand and tell him to go home. Marcus had soccer practice that afternoon, and Daniel stood on the sidelines with the other parents, only half watching the drills while his mind spun through scenarios for tomorrow's meeting. What did you say to a 9-year-old who owed you her life? How did you explain that you were just a broken person trying to do one good thing? And what if Emma was disappointed? What if the reality of him couldn't match up to whatever story she'd built in her head about her cell buddy? Mr. Brooks? A voice pulled him from his thoughts. Tyler's mom, Jennifer, was looking at him with concern. You okay? You've been staring at the same spot for 10 minutes. Sorry, long day. I heard about Marcus's fall. That bruise is impressive. He's very proud of it, Jennifer laughed. Boys and their battle scars. Tyler was jealous he didn't have a matching one. She paused, studying Daniel's face. You sure you're okay? You seem distracted. Daniel considered deflecting, then decided he was tired of carrying everything alone. I'm meeting someone important tomorrow, someone I helped a long time ago, and I'm nervous about it. Someone you helped? Like a former client? Something like that. He managed a smile. I'm probably overthinking it. You're definitely overthinking it, Jennifer said kindly. But that's what parents do. We overthink everything, goes with the territory. That night, Daniel lay awake long after putting Marcus to bed, staring at the ceiling and remembering. The donation day came back in fragments. The clinical smell of the facility, the hum of the apheresis machine, the nurse who'd told him he was saving a life. He'd felt numb then, going through the motions because it was something to do besides drown in grief. Sarah had been dead for 3 days. The funeral flowers were still wilting in his living room. His mother-in-law was staying to help with Marcus, and the house felt full of people but utterly empty of the only person who mattered. Sitting in that chair with needles in his arms, Daniel had thought, at least someone's family won't be destroyed today. At least someone will get to keep living. It had felt like the smallest possible compensation for the massive injustice of Sarah's death. A stranger's child would survive because his wife couldn't. Now that stranger had a name. Emma. A 9-year-old who drew pictures and played soccer badly and wanted to meet her cell buddy. Wednesday arrived with crystalline clarity, the kind of spring day that made everything feel possible. Daniel took Marcus to school, went through the motions at work, and left at 3:30. The park was a 15-minute drive from his office, enough time for his anxiety to ratchet up to near panic levels. He arrived early and sat in his car, watching families on the playground. Kids shrieked and ran, parents pushed swings, life happened with careless ease. Daniel spotted Rachel's Honda pulling into the lot at exactly 4 o'clock. His heart hammered as she parked 3 spaces away. Rachel got out first, then opened the back door. A small figure emerged, a girl with a purple backpack and long dark hair pulled into a ponytail. She wore jeans and a t-shirt with a cartoon unicorn on it. She looked healthy, strong, alive. Emma spotted Daniel getting out of his car and froze. Rachel said something to her daughter, then gently guided her forward. Daniel forced his legs to move, to close the distance between them. "Hi," Rachel said softly when they met in the middle. "Daniel, this is Emma. Emma, this is Mr. Brooks." Emma stared up at him with wide brown eyes. She was small for 9, Daniel thought, probably a lingering effect of the cancer and treatment. But there was nothing fragile about the way she looked at him. Her gaze was direct, searching, impossibly wise for someone so young. "Hi, Emma," Daniel managed. His voice sounded too loud. "You're really him?" Emma's voice was quiet but clear. "You're my cell buddy?" "I am." Emma's eyes filled with tears. Without warning, she launched herself forward and wrapped her arms around Daniel's waist, pressing her face against his chest. Daniel stood frozen for a heartbeat, then slowly brought his arms around her small frame. She was crying, and he was crying, and Rachel was crying, and the whole world seemed to narrow down to this moment, this impossible, beautiful moment. "Thank you," Emma whispered against his shirt. "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for giving me my life back." Daniel couldn't speak. His throat had closed completely. He just held this child, this living, breathing proof that his grief had transformed into something precious, and let himself feel the weight of it. 5 years of wondering, of not knowing, of carrying that decision like a secret. And here she was. Here was the answer. When Emma finally pulled back, she was smiling through tears. "Mom said you didn't want anything for helping me, but I made you something anyway, just in case I ever met you." She dug into her backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn at the edges like it had been opened and refolded many times. Daniel unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing, crayon and marker, the kind of art only children create with complete unselfconscious joy. It showed 2 figures holding hands under a rainbow. One was small with long hair, clearly Emma. The other was taller, with a smile and something that might have been wings. "That's you," Emma explained, pointing to the taller figure. "That's my angel. I drew this when I was in the hospital, when I was really sick. Mom told me someone out there was sharing their cells with me so I could get better, and I imagined what you looked like. I got some parts wrong. You're not as tall as I thought, and you don't actually have wings, but I got the important part right." "What part is that?" Daniel's voice cracked. "The smile. You look like someone who smiles even when they're sad. That's what angels do." Rachel made a small sound, pressing her hand to her mouth. Daniel carefully refolded the drawing and put it in his jacket pocket, right over his heart. "Can I tell you something, Emma?" He crouched down so he was at her eye level. "When I helped you, I was very sad. Someone I loved very much had just died, and I felt like the whole world was dark. But helping you, knowing that maybe someone wouldn't have to feel as sad as I did, that made the darkness a little lighter. So you helped me too. We helped each other." Emma considered this with the seriousness of someone much older. "Mom says sometimes people need each other and don't even know it until later. Your mom is very smart." "She cries when she talks about you," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Happy crying, not sad crying. She says you're a miracle." "I think you're the miracle," Daniel said. "You fought so hard to be here. That's the real miracle." Emma grinned, and Daniel saw the resemblance to Rachel, the same gray-green eyes, the same quiet strength. "Want to see me on the monkey bars? I'm really good. I can go all the way across without falling." "I'd love to see that." They walked to the playground together, Emma chattering about school and her violin lessons, and her brother Jake, who was mostly annoying but sometimes cool. Rachel fell into step beside Daniel, their shoulders almost touching. "You okay?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "This is the most emotionally overwhelming thing I've experienced in 5 years. But also," he watched Emma scramble up the ladder to the monkey bars. "Also, it feels right. Does that make sense?" Perfect sense. Rachel's hand brushed against his, deliberate this time. "Thank you for being brave enough to come. Thank you for finding me." They watched Emma swing across the bars with confident ease, her laughter bright and clear. Other kids joined her, and soon she was organizing an elaborate game that seemed to involve a lot of running and shouting. She was so alive, so present, so utterly ordinary in the way healthy children were ordinary. It was everything Daniel hadn't let himself imagine when he sat in that donation chair. "She almost died," Rachel said softly. "Twice. Once before the transplant when the leukemia came back, and once after when her body tried to reject the new cells. I sat by her bed for 3 days straight during the rejection episode, holding her hand, begging her to fight, and she did. She fought so hard." Rachel's voice shook. "I tell myself I'm the one who got her through it, but the truth is you gave us the fighting chance. Without that transplant, without your cells, she wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here. Not really. I would have lost her, and I don't think I would have survived that." Daniel took Rachel's hand and squeezed it. She squeezed back, and they stood there holding hands like teenagers while Emma played, two people connected by impossible circumstances, and the child who was the bridge between them. "I have a son," Daniel said after a moment. "Marcus. He's 8. He's the reason I survived losing Sarah. Having to be there for him kept me from falling apart completely. I think you'd like him. He's funny and stubborn and way too smart for his own good. Emma would love to meet him, if you're comfortable with that." "I'd like that." Daniel turned to look at Rachel. "This is crazy, right? This whole situation is completely insane." "Completely," Rachel agreed. "But sometimes the best things are." Emma ran over, breathless and glowing. "Did you see? I made it across twice." "You were amazing," Daniel said. "Want to try? The monkey bars are really fun." "I'm a little old for monkey bars." "You're not that old," Emma said with the brutal honesty of children. "Come on." Daniel let himself be dragged to the playground equipment, let himself try to navigate monkey bars with significantly less grace than a 9-year-old, let himself laugh when he missed a bar and had to drop down. Emma found this hilarious. Rachel filmed it on her phone, grinning. For an hour, they just played. Emma showed Daniel every corner of the playground, introduced him to her favorite swing, insisted they all three go down the slide together in a chain. It was ordinary and extraordinary at the same time, the kind of afternoon that should have been unremarkable except for the weight of everything unspoken beneath it. As the sun started to sink lower, Rachel checked her watch. "We should get going, Em. Jake's practice ends at 5:30 and we need to pick him up." Emma's face fell. "Already? But we just got here. We've been here an hour and 15 minutes. That's not just. Can Mr. Brooks come to dinner?" Emma looked up at Daniel with hopeful eyes. "Please? I want him to meet Jake, and I want to show him my rock collection." Daniel glanced at Rachel, who gave him a small smile and a shrug that said, "Your call." He thought about his empty house, the frozen dinner he'd planned to heat up, the evening of pretending to watch TV while actually just existing. "I'd like that," he said, "if it's really okay." "It's more than okay," Rachel said. "Fair warning, though, Jake is 14 and currently in the phase where he pretends nothing impresses him. Don't take it personally." They caravanned to Rachel's house, a modest ranch-style home in a neighborhood that reminded Daniel of his own. Middle-class, family-oriented, trees lining the streets. Emma bounded out of Rachel's car the second it stopped and waited impatiently for Daniel to park. Come on, I want to show you everything." Inside, the house had the comfortable chaos of a family actively living in it. School papers covered the refrigerator, shoes piled by the door, a stack of library books teetered on the coffee table. Emma grabbed Daniel's hand and dragged him on a tour, showing him her room with its collection of stuffed animals and rocks and drawings, the kitchen where she helped Mom make cookies sometimes, the backyard where they'd planted tomatoes that were growing really good. Rachel started pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. I'm making spaghetti. Hope that's okay. It's one of the few things I can cook that everyone actually eats. Spaghetti's perfect. Daniel felt awkward standing in her kitchen, unsure of his role here. Guest? Friend? Something else? You can help if you want. Or Emma will talk your ear off. Your choice. Daniel chose helping. They fell into an easy rhythm, Rachel cooking while Daniel chopped vegetables for salad, Emma chattering nonstop about everything and nothing. It felt domestic in a way that was both comfortable and terrifying. When was the last time Daniel had cooked with someone? Shared a kitchen? Years. Literally years. The front door banged open at 5:40. Mom, I'm home! A tall teenager appeared in the kitchen doorway, stopped short when he saw Daniel. Who's this? Jake, this is Mr. Brooks. Rachel hesitated, and Daniel could see her calculating how much to explain. He's a friend. Daniel, this is my son Jake. Jake had his mother's coloring but his father's height, already close to 6 feet and probably not done growing. He looked at Daniel with unconcealed suspicion, the way teenage boys looked at any man in their mother's house. Nice to meet you. Daniel offered his hand. Jake shook it with a grip that was probably meant to be intimidating. You mom's boyfriend or something? Jake! Rachel's voice was sharp. What? I'm just asking. He's Emma's cell buddy, Emma announced proudly. The one who saved my life. Jake's expression transformed instantly, suspicion melting into something like awe. Wait, seriously? You're the donor? That's me, Daniel said. Jake seemed to be struggling for words. That's actually pretty cool. I mean, not cool that you're here, that's weird, but cool that you did that. For Emma. For us. Jake's been terrible at saying thank you since he turned 14, Rachel said dryly. I said it was cool. That's basically thank you. Emma giggled. Jake, show him your room. You have all those basketball posters. He doesn't want to see my room, Squirt. Actually, I'd like to, Daniel said. I played basketball in high school, point guard. Jake's eyebrows rose. Yeah? Any good? Define good. Did you start? Junior and senior year. That seemed to earn Daniel some credibility. Jake jerked his head toward the hallway. Come on, I'll show you my setup. Jake's room was exactly what Daniel expected from a 14-year-old athlete. Posters of NBA players, a basketball hoop on the back of the door, clothes that hadn't quite made it to the hamper. But what caught Daniel's attention was a framed photo on the desk. Jake, maybe 10 years old, standing next to a hospital bed where a small bald child sat smiling weakly. Emma during treatment. Jake noticed Daniel looking. That was taken right after Emma's transplant. Mom made me go visit even though I was scared to see her like that, all bald and sick-looking. But she was still Emma, still making jokes and asking about my basketball games. His voice got quieter. I almost lost her. Almost lost my little sister. And there was nothing I could do except sit there and hope. He looked at Daniel directly. But you did something. You gave her a chance. So yeah, it's cool that you're here, even if you are kind of old. Daniel laughed. I'm 34. Like I said, old. But Jake was grinning. They talked basketball for a few minutes, Jake showing off his trophies and describing his team's playoff chances. When they returned to the kitchen, Emma had set the table with exaggerated care, and Rachel was draining pasta. Dinner was chaotic in the best way. Emma talked nonstop, Jake interjected with brotherly teasing, Rachel mediated disputes and passed garlic bread. Daniel found himself laughing more than he had in months, drawn into the comfortable chaos of their family dynamic. It felt foreign and familiar at the same time, like remembering a language you used to speak fluently. After dinner, Emma insisted on showing Daniel her rock collection, which turned into showing him her art portfolio, which turned into Jake demonstrating a complicated basketball dribbling technique in the driveway. By the time Daniel looked at his watch, it was nearly 8:30. I should go, he said reluctantly. Marcus gets home from his after-school program at 6:30, and I promised I'd call to say goodnight. Can you come back? Emma asked immediately. Please? We could have game night. Mom makes really good popcorn. Daniel looked at Rachel, who was watching him with soft eyes. You're welcome anytime, she said. If you want to, no pressure. I'd like that, Daniel said, and meant it. He said goodbye to the kids, Then Rachel walked him to his car. The street was quiet now, evening settling in with the particular stillness of suburban neighborhoods after dark. "Thank you for tonight," Rachel said. "Emma hasn't stopped smiling since the park, and Jake doesn't warm up to people easily. The fact that he showed you his room is basically the teenage equivalent of a marriage proposal." Daniel laughed. "They're great kids. You've done an amazing job with them." "We've done an amazing job surviving," Rachel corrected. "There's a difference." She hesitated, then stepped closer. "I know this is all happening fast. Meeting Emma, coming to dinner, getting thrown into our chaotic family life. If it's too much, you can say so. I won't be offended." "It's not too much," Daniel said. "It's different, overwhelming sometimes, but not too much." "Good, because Emma's already planning our next gathering, something about teaching you to play her favorite board game." "What game?" "I have no idea. She invents new ones constantly." Rachel smiled. "Fair warning, she always wins, even when she's making up the rules as she goes." "I'll consider myself warned." They stood in the quiet for another moment, close enough that Daniel could smell her perfume, something light and floral. Close enough that if he leaned forward just slightly, he could kiss her. The thought caught him off guard, made his heart race. Too soon, way too soon. But Rachel was looking at him like she'd had the same thought, and maybe timing didn't matter as much as he thought it did. "I should go," he said again, but didn't move. "You should," Rachel agreed, also not moving. Daniel took a breath, stepped back. "Good night, Rachel." "Good night, Daniel." He drove home through familiar streets that somehow looked different now, like the world had shifted while he wasn't paying attention. His phone was full of texts from Marcus, updates about his day, a picture of his new best friend's hamster, 3 messages asking when Dad would be home. Daniel called him from the car. "Where were you?" Marcus demanded. "Mrs. Chen said you texted you'd be late, but you didn't say why." "I was having dinner with some new friends." "What friends? Do I know them?" "Not yet, but I think you'd like them. There's a boy your age, well, he's 9, and his brother plays basketball." "Cool, can I meet them?" "Maybe," Daniel said carefully. "We'll see." He got home to find the house exactly as he'd left it, quiet, orderly, empty. But instead of the usual weight of loneliness, Daniel felt something different. Possibility. Hope. The sense that maybe, just maybe, there was space in his life for more than just surviving. He pulled Emma's drawing from his pocket and smoothed it carefully on the kitchen table. 2 figures under a rainbow, holding hands. An angel with a smile who wasn't quite as tall as she'd imagined, but got the important parts right. Daniel picked up his phone and texted Rachel. "Thank you for tonight. For Emma. For everything." Her response came quickly. "Thank you for being exactly who you are." Daniel looked at the drawing again, at the rainbow and the smiling figure and the little girl who'd imagined him into existence before she ever knew his name. Then he carefully placed it on the refrigerator, right next to Marcus's artwork, and let himself believe that maybe happiness wasn't something that happened once and never again. Maybe it was something you could find in the spaces between grief, in the unexpected connections, in the knowledge that one quiet decision made in darkness could bloom into light you never saw coming. Maybe second chances were real after all. The following Saturday morning found Daniel standing in his kitchen, staring at 2 soccer jerseys laid out on the counter like evidence in a trial where he was both defendant and judge. Marcus sat at the breakfast table, watching with the amused patience of a child who knew his father was overthinking something simple. "Dad, it's just a soccer game. Pick one." "The blue one makes me look like I'm trying too hard. The gray one makes me look like I don't care at all." Marcus rolled his eyes with theatrical precision. "You're meeting Emma and her family at the park, not the president. Wear the gray one. It matches your normal vibe." "I have a normal vibe?" "Yeah. Dad vibe. Relaxed but responsible." Marcus grinned. "Also, you said Emma plays soccer too, right? So wear the one that says, 'I understand sports,' without being weird about it." Daniel grabbed the gray jersey and pulled it on, wondering when his 8-year-old had become the voice of reason in their household. The plan was simple. Marcus's team had a game at 11, and Rachel had mentioned that Emma's team played at the same complex at 1. They'd arranged to meet for lunch in between, a casual overlap of their separate lives that felt both natural and terrifying. "Are you nervous?" Marcus asked as they loaded his soccer gear into the car. Why would I be nervous? Because you've checked your phone like 50 times, and you keep doing that thing where you tap your fingers on stuff when you're thinking too hard. Daniel stopped mid-tap on the steering wheel. When did you get so observant? I'm always observant. You're just usually better at hiding when you're worried. Marcus buckled his seatbelt and looked at his father with unexpected seriousness. Is this about the lady and her kids, the ones you had dinner with? Daniel started the car, buying himself a moment to figure out how to explain this. Her name is Rachel. Her daughter Emma is 9 and her son Jake is 14. And yes, I'm a little nervous about you meeting them. Because you like the mom? The directness of the question caught Daniel off guard. It's complicated, bud. That's what grown-ups always say when the answer is yes, but they don't want to admit it. Marcus twisted in his seat to look at him. It's okay if you like her, Dad. I know you miss Mom. I miss her too. But Mom would want you to be happy, right? That's what Grandma Joan always says. Daniel's throat tightened. Your Grandma Joan says a lot of things. But she's right about this one. Marcus faced forward again, his voice matter-of-fact. I just want to know if Emma's cool. Because if you're going to date her mom, I'll probably see her a lot, and it would be better if she's not annoying. I'm not dating her mom, Daniel protested, though the words felt less certain than they should have. We're just friends. Sure, Dad, friends who make you nervous and check your phone 50 times. They drove the rest of the way in companionable silence, Marcus humming along to the radio while Daniel's mind spun through possible scenarios. What if Marcus and Emma didn't get along? What if the easy connection he'd felt with Rachel's family didn't translate to mixing their kids? What if this whole thing was moving too fast and he was about to crash it into reality? The soccer complex was already buzzing with activity when they arrived. Multiple fields, dozens of teams, parents setting up canopies and unpacking coolers. Marcus's team was warming up on Field 3. Daniel walked him over, exchanged greetings with the other parents, and tried to focus on the game about to start rather than the fact that Rachel and her kids would be arriving in less than 2 hours. Marcus played well, scoring 1 goal and assisting on another. Daniel cheered from the sidelines with genuine enthusiasm, watching his son weave through defenders with a confidence that seemed to grow every week. Sarah should have been there to see it. The thought came automatically, familiar as breathing, but this time it was accompanied by something new. The thought that Rachel would understand exactly how that felt. The bittersweet ache of celebrating milestones while missing the person who should have been there to share them. The game ended with Marcus's team winning 3-1. Marcus ran over, sweaty and grinning, and Daniel handed him a water bottle and a towel. You were amazing out there. Did you see that second goal? Tyler passed it to me and I just knew exactly where to kick it. It was like the ball and my foot were magnets. Marcus gulped water. What time are we meeting Emma and her family? Noon. We've got about 40 minutes. Cool. Can we get burgers? I'm starving. They walked toward the concession area, Marcus chattering about the game. Daniel was so focused on his son that he almost didn't notice Rachel standing by the condiment station, holding a tray with 2 hot dogs and watching them approach with a smile that made his heart stumble. Hey, she said. You're early. Emma's game doesn't start until 1. Marcus's team just finished. This is him, by the way. Marcus, this is Rachel. Marcus studied Rachel with the unfiltered assessment only children could pull off. You're the nurse who helped my dad when I fell, right? That's me. How's your head? Totally fine. I have a cool scar now, though. Want to see? He pushed his hair back to reveal a small line on his forehead. Battle scars are important, Rachel said seriously. They tell your story. Marcus beamed. That's what I said. Dad thinks I'm being dramatic. Dads often don't understand the significance of battle scars. Rachel's eyes met Daniel's over Marcus's head, warm with amusement. Emma appeared then, running up with a soccer ball under her arm and cleats already on. She skidded to a stop when she saw Marcus, suddenly shy in a way she hadn't been at the park. Hi, she said quietly. Hi, Marcus replied with equal awkwardness. The 2 kids stared at each other for a long moment, and Daniel felt the entire trajectory of his future hanging on whether they could figure out how to connect. Then Emma noticed the logo on Marcus's soccer jersey. You play for the Wildcats? My friend Sophia plays for your team. She talks about this kid named Marcus who's really good at corner kicks. Marcus's face lit up. That's me! Sophia's the one with the really powerful kicks, right? She scored twice last week. She told me. She said you two are like the unstoppable duo. Emma's shyness evaporated. I play defense mostly. I'm not super good at scoring, but I'm really good at stealing the ball. Defense is important. My dad says games are won by good defense, not just good offense. My mom says the same thing. And just like that, they were talking over each other about soccer strategies and favorite players and whether turf or grass fields were better. Daniel exchanged a glance with Rachel, who looked as relieved as he felt. That could have gone worse, she murmured. I was preparing for awkward silence. Me too. Emma's been nervous all morning. She really wanted Marcus to like her. Why? Rachel gave him a look that suggested the answer should be obvious. Because you're important to me, which means Marcus is important, and Emma's smart enough to understand that. The simple honesty of it made Daniel's chest feel tight. For what it's worth, I was nervous too, about all of this. Past tense, you're not nervous now? Terrified, actually, but in a different way. They got food, burgers for the boys, salads for the adults, fries to share, and found a picnic table in the shade. Jake appeared from wherever he'd been warming up with his club team, took one look at the situation, and raised his eyebrows at his mother. So this is happening, huh? Don't be rude, Rachel said mildly. I'm not being rude, I'm being observant. Jake dropped onto the bench next to Marcus. You're Marcus? I'm Jake. Your dad saved my sister's life. Marcus's eyes went wide. Wait, what? Daniel realized with a sinking feeling that he hadn't actually explained any of this to his son yet. Remember how I told you I donated blood cells a few years ago? Emma was the person who received them. She had leukemia. Marcus looked at Emma with new eyes. You had cancer? Emma nodded. When I was 4. But I got better because your dad helped me. Marcus struggled for words. That's really cool. I mean, not cool that you were sick. Cool that my dad helped. He never told me about that. I didn't want to make a big deal about it, Daniel said quietly. Are you kidding? That's the coolest thing ever. My dad saved someone's life. Marcus turned to Emma. So, you wouldn't be here if he hadn't done that. Probably not, Emma said with the pragmatic acceptance of a child who'd spent too much time thinking about mortality. The doctor said I needed new cells or I would die. Your dad gave me his cells. Now I'm alive. Marcus processed this, his young face serious. Then he looked at his father with something Daniel couldn't quite identify. Pride, maybe, mixed with a new understanding of the man Daniel had been in those dark days after Sarah died. You never tell me about the important stuff, Marcus said finally. I'm working on that, Daniel admitted. They ate lunch while Emma and Marcus traded soccer stories, and Jake offered periodic commentary that was roughly 70% sarcasm and 30% genuine interest. Daniel watched his son laugh at Emma's description of accidentally kicking the ball into her own goal, saw how naturally they fell into the easy rhythm of kids who'd found common ground, and felt something settle in his chest that had been anxious and tight for weeks. When Emma's game time approached, they all walked over to Field 5 together. Emma's team was called the Lightning, and they were playing a team from a neighboring town. Marcus insisted on sitting right at the front of the bleachers so he could see everything, and Daniel found himself sandwiched between his son and Rachel while Jake sprawled behind them, half watching the field and half texting someone. Emma's number 7, Rachel said as the teams took their positions. Defense, like she said. Watch how she reads the play. She's actually got really good instincts. The game started, and Rachel transformed. The calm, composed nurse Daniel had come to know became an animated soccer mom, shouting encouragement and strategic advice. Daniel found it endearing and slightly terrifying. Good position, Em. Stay with her. Watch the cross. Rachel was on her feet. That's it. Nice clear. Marcus giggled. Your mom is really into this. She gets competitive, Jake said from behind them. Last season, she got into an argument with a ref and almost got kicked out. I did not almost get kicked out, Rachel said without taking her eyes off the field. I was simply advocating for fair play. You called him blind as a bat. He was. Daniel laughed and Rachel shot him a mock glare. Don't encourage him. I have a reputation to maintain. Of being calm and professional? Of being right. There's a difference. They watched the game unfold, Emma proving to be exactly as good at defense as she'd claimed. She wasn't the flashiest player, but she was smart, anticipating passes, positioning herself perfectly, breaking up plays before they could develop. In the second half, she stole the ball from an opposing forward and passed it up the field, starting the sequence that led to her team's only goal. Rachel was out of her seat cheering. Marcus joined her, having decided Emma was now his friend and therefore worth supporting enthusiastically. Jake even put down his phone to offer a genuine, "Nice play, Squirt," when Emma jogged past. The game ended in a 1-1 tie, which Emma's coach declared a moral victory against a team that had been undefeated all season. Emma ran over to them, grass-stained and glowing. "Did you see my assist?" she asked breathlessly. "It was perfect," Marcus said. "The way you stole it and immediately passed, that was smart. Most people try to run with it and lose it. My coach says the best play is passing to someone in a better position." "Your coach is right." They walked back to the parking lot together, the kids leading the way and chattering about soccer while Jake trailed behind them like a teenage shepherd. Daniel fell into step beside Rachel, close enough that their shoulders brushed occasionally. "So," Rachel said. "That went well. Better than well. They actually like each other." "Was there ever any doubt?" "Absolutely. I've been catastrophizing all week about worst-case scenarios." Rachel laughed. "Me too. I had this nightmare that Emma would say something wildly inappropriate and Marcus would cry and you'd never speak to us again." "What wildly inappropriate thing would Emma say?" "I don't know. That's what made it a nightmare. The specifics were vague, but the horror was real." They reached their cars, and Daniel felt the afternoon drawing to a close, with the inevitable momentum of good things ending. Emma and Marcus were making plans to practice together. Jake was checking the time with the impatience of a teenager who had somewhere else to be, and Rachel was giving Daniel a look that suggested she didn't want this to end either. "We should do this again," she said. "If you want, maybe not just soccer, maybe something all of us could do together." "Like what?" "I don't know, bowling, mini golf, something terrible where we're all equally bad at it." "I'm excellent at mini golf," Daniel protested. "Then we're definitely doing it. I need to see this supposed excellence." Rachel smiled. "How about next Saturday? If you're free?" Daniel thought about his calendar, which was usually just variations on work and Marcus's activities. The idea of blocking out time specifically to see Rachel and her kids felt significant, like making a choice rather than just letting things happen. "Next Saturday works. Marcus has a game in the morning, but we're free after 2. "Perfect. Mini golf at 3, then maybe dinner after?" "My treat, since you're going to be so humiliated by my superior pudding skills that you'll need comfort food." "Your trash talk needs work," Daniel said, but he was grinning. "Give me time. I'm just getting started." They said their goodbyes, Emma hugging Marcus like they'd been friends for years rather than hours, Jake offering Marcus a fist bump, and a "you're cool, kid," that made Marcus stand about 3 inches taller. Daniel watched them drive away, then turned to find his son watching him with knowing eyes. "You really like her," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah," Daniel admitted. "I really do." "Good. Emma's awesome, and Jake's cool in that teenage way where he pretends nothing matters but actually pays attention to everything. I like them." "Me too, bud." They drove home, Marcus talking a mile a minute about Emma's defensive strategies and whether they should practice together before the next game. Daniel listened with half his attention, the other half replaying the afternoon. Rachel's laugh, the easy way the kids had connected, the sense that something was building here that felt both fragile and strong. That night, after Marcus was in bed, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with a beer and his phone, staring at Rachel's contact information. They'd been texting sporadically since meeting, but nothing serious, just logistics and casual check-ins. He wanted to say something more, something that acknowledged what was happening between them, but every message he drafted felt either too casual or too intense. Finally, he just typed, "Thank you for today, for sharing your family with us. Marcus hasn't stopped talking about Emma." Rachel's response came quickly. Emma hasn't stopped talking about Marcus either. Jake even said something nice, which is basically a miracle. I think this is going well, terrifyingly well. Terrifying is the right word. Are you scared? Daniel thought about the question. Yes, but not in a bad way. In a this matters and I don't want to mess it up way. I feel the same. It's been a long time since something felt this important. How long were you married before your ex left? There was a pause before Rachel's next message appeared. 7 years. We met in college, got married right after graduation. I thought we'd make it forever. Then Emma got sick and he couldn't handle it. Walked out when we needed him most. I spent 2 years being angry, another year being sad, and the last year trying to figure out how to be okay with the fact that some people just don't have what it takes when things get hard. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm better off without him. Emma and Jake are better off without him. We learned to be strong on our own. Another pause. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't want someone to be strong with sometimes. Someone who understands what it's like to have your world fall apart and then have to rebuild it piece by piece. Daniel felt the weight of that statement settle over him. I know exactly what that's like. I know you do. That's why this is terrifying, because you get it in a way most people don't, and that makes it real, makes it possible, makes it something I can't just brush off as a nice distraction. They texted back and forth for another hour, the conversation meandering from serious to silly and back again. Rachel told him about Jake's basketball obsession, how he practiced free throws in their driveway until dark every night, determined to make varsity next year. Daniel told her about Marcus's recent fascination with architecture, how he'd started drawing elaborate building designs and asking questions about load-bearing walls and cantilevers. He asked me yesterday if buildings could be alive, Daniel typed, like actually alive with feelings. I didn't have a good answer. What did you say? I said that buildings hold memories, which is kind of like feelings, that every house remembers the people who lived in it, the joy and sadness that happened within its walls. He seemed satisfied with that. That's beautiful and wise. Where did you learn to talk like that? Grief, mostly. It makes you think about what persists, what lasts beyond us. There was a long pause before Rachel responded. Sarah would be proud of the father you've become, the man you've become. Daniel felt tears prick his eyes. You didn't know her. I know you. I know Marcus. I can see what she left behind. And it's beautiful, Daniel. You're raising an incredible kid who's kind and thoughtful and secure enough to be excited about his dad moving on. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens because someone did the hard work of loving him through grief. Daniel set down his phone and pressed his palms against his eyes, overwhelmed. It had been so long since anyone had acknowledged the sheer weight of what the last 5 years had required. Everyone saw the result. Marcus was fine, Daniel was functional, they'd survived. But no one talked about the countless small moments of choosing to keep going when staying in bed felt impossible. The nights of holding Marcus while he cried for his mother. The therapy sessions. The parent-teacher conferences where Daniel had to explain why his son sometimes went quiet and unreachable. The birthday parties and holidays navigated solo, trying to be both parents at once while grieving the one he'd lost. He picked up his phone again. Thank you for seeing that. I see you, Daniel, all of you. The grief and the strength and the fear and the hope. And I'm not scared of any of it. You should be. I'm a lot of baggage. So am I. Cancer mom with abandonment issues and 2 kids who've seen too much. We're both walking therapy sessions. Maybe that's why this works. We're too complicated to be scared of each other's complications. Daniel laughed despite the tears on his face. That's a hell of a foundation for a relationship. Is that what this is? A relationship? His finger hovered over the keyboard. Was it? They'd known each other less than 2 weeks. But it felt like more. Like they'd been circling each other for 5 years, connected by cells and fate, and a decision made in grief that had bloomed into something neither of them expected. I don't know what this is, he typed honestly, but I know I want to find out, if you do. I do. They said goodnight eventually, though Daniel sat at the table long after, staring at Emma's drawing on the refrigerator. 2 figures holding hands under a rainbow. An angel who smiled through sadness, A child's imagination somehow predicting a future none of them could have anticipated. The following week moved with strange momentum. Daniel found himself texting Rachel throughout the day, pictures of his lunch, stupid jokes, observations about work. She responded with equal frequency, and gradually their conversations filled the spaces between their separate lives. Marcus asked about Emma constantly, wanting to know if they could practice together before Saturday, if she liked the same video games, if Daniel thought she'd want to come to his birthday party next month. "Slow down, bud," Daniel said. "We're still getting to know each other." "But you like her mom, right? So we're going to keep hanging out?" "Probably, but relationships take time." "How much time?" "I don't know. There's no schedule for this stuff." Marcus considered this. "Mom died when I was 3. I don't really remember her that much. Just pieces, the way she smelled, her voice when she sang to me, but not like her whole person, you know?" Daniel's heart cracked. "I know. So if you and Rachel keep hanging out and she keeps being around, will that be okay? Will Mom be sad?" Daniel pulled his son into a hug, holding him tight. "Your mom loved you more than anything in the world, and the one thing she wanted most was for you to be happy and for me to take care of you. If Rachel makes us happy, if she helps us be a better family, then Mom would want that. I'm sure of it." "But you'll still tell me stories about her, about Mom?" "Every day if you want. Rachel isn't replacing your mom, Marcus. Nobody ever could. But maybe she's something else, something new." Marcus nodded against his chest. "Okay. That's good then." Saturday arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, mild temperature, the kind of day that felt designed for outdoor activities. Daniel picked Marcus up from his morning soccer game, both of them still riding the high of a 4-1 victory where Marcus had scored twice. They went home to shower and change, Marcus insisting on wearing his nice jeans and the collared shirt Grandma Joan had bought him. "It's mini golf, not a wedding," Daniel said. "I want to look good. Emma's going to be there." "Since when do you care about looking good?" Marcus gave him a withering look. "Since always. You just don't pay attention." They arrived at Adventure Golf at 5 minutes to 3. Rachel's car was already in the parking lot, Emma and Jake visible through the windshield arguing about something. Daniel felt the familiar flutter of nerves in his stomach as he and Marcus walked toward them. Emma saw them first and waved enthusiastically, practically bouncing in her seat. Jake rolled his eyes but was smiling as they all got out of the car. Rachel looked beautiful in jeans and a light sweater, her hair down around her shoulders. "Ready to witness my legendary putting skills?" she asked Daniel. "Ready to witness reality crush your delusions?" He countered. "Oh, it's on." They got their putters and balls, the kids immediately running ahead to the first hole, a simple straight shot with a windmill obstacle. Emma lined up her shot with intense concentration, tapped the ball, and watched it roll neatly through the windmill and drop into the hole. "Hole in one!" she shrieked, jumping up and down. Marcus high-fived her, then stepped up for his turn. His ball made it through the windmill but bounced off the back wall, rolling back toward him. "This is rigged." "It's called physics," Jake said, then proceeded to sink his ball in 2 shots. Rachel went next, taking her time to line up the angle. Her ball went through the windmill, curved along the edge of the hole, and dropped in. "What were you saying about reality-crushing delusions?" she asked Daniel sweetly. "That was luck." "Prove it." Daniel stepped up, feeling the pressure of 4 pairs of eyes on him. He'd played mini-golf maybe twice in the last 5 years, both times at Marcus's birthday parties where he'd been more focused on managing children than actually playing. But he'd claimed excellence, and now he had to deliver. He took a breath, lined up his shot, and putted. The ball rolled through the windmill, hit the back wall at the perfect angle, and dropped into the hole. The kids cheered. Rachel's jaw dropped. "Okay," she admitted. "That was impressive." "Legendary skills," Daniel said with exaggerated modesty. "I tried to warn you." They moved through the course, the competition becoming increasingly ridiculous as Rachel and Daniel traded insults and victories. The kids formed their own alliance, Emma and Marcus conspiring on the best angles, while Jake offered unsolicited advice that was occasionally helpful and often sarcastic. By the 9th hole, a complicated maze of curves with a dragon obstacle, they were tied. "This is the decider," Rachel declared. "Winner buys ice cream." Winner gets bragging rights, Daniel corrected, and doesn't have to buy ice cream. That's the same thing. Not in my accounting. Emma went first, her ball navigating the maze before getting stuck against the dragon's tail. Marcus managed to get his through, but overshot the hole. Jake landed in 2 shots, declaring himself the actual winner regardless of what the adults did. Rachel stepped up, missed her first shot entirely, and sent her ball careening off into the rough. I blame the lighting, she said. It's 3 in the afternoon, Daniel pointed out. Exactly, too bright. Threw off my depth perception. Daniel lined up his shot, trying not to smile. The ball rolled smoothly through the maze, curved around the dragon, and stopped 6 inches from the hole. His second shot tapped it in. Victory, he declared. You're insufferable when you win. You're delightful when you lose. I'm delightful always. They finished the course, Daniel maintaining his lead through the final holes despite Rachel's increasingly creative attempts to distract him. By the time they returned their putters, everyone was laughing and arguing about who had actually performed best. Jake won, Emma insisted. He had the lowest score overall. I wasn't competing with the children, Rachel said. Just with your father. That seems unfair to the children, Daniel observed. Life is unfair. They need to learn that. They got ice cream from the snack bar, settling at a picnic table in the late afternoon sun. Marcus and Emma shared a sundae, their heads close together as they discussed soccer strategies. Jake ate a triple scoop cone while scrolling through his phone. Rachel and Daniel sat across from each other, their knees touching under the table. This is nice, Rachel said quietly. All of us together like this. It feels right. It does, Daniel agreed. Scary, but right. Why scary? Because I want it to last, and I don't trust things that feel this good. Rachel reached across the table and took his hand. I get that. I spent 4 years not trusting anything that felt good because everything good had been taken from me. But maybe that's exactly why we should trust this. We both know how bad things can get. We've survived the worst, so if something feels right now, maybe it actually is. Daniel squeezed her hand, unable to find words adequate for what he felt. Around them, their children laughed and argued and existed in the uncomplicated way kids did, unaware of the weight their parents carried or the courage it took to reach for happiness again. I'm falling for you, Daniel said suddenly. I don't know if that's too fast or too soon or too much, but it's true. And I thought you should know. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. I'm falling for you too. Have been since you opened that door and looked at me like I'd just turned your world upside down. You did turn my world upside down. Good. It needed turning. They sat there holding hands across the table while the afternoon stretched into evening. Their children around them, the weight of the past and the promise of the future balanced on this single perfect moment. And for the first time in 5 years, Daniel felt like he wasn't just surviving. He was living, actually living. And it was terrifying and beautiful and everything he'd thought he'd lost forever when Sarah died. The universe had given him a second chance. Not to replace what he'd lost. Nothing could do that. But to build something new alongside the memory of what had been. To let joy and grief coexist. To let himself hope again. And sitting there with Rachel's hand in his and their children laughing in the golden light, Daniel finally understood what Emma had drawn all those years ago. Not just an angel who smiled through sadness, but 2 people finding each other in the darkness, holding on, and walking toward the light together. The confession hung between them like something fragile and precious, and Daniel half expected the universe to intervene with some crisis or complication that would shatter the moment. Instead, Emma shrieked with laughter at something Marcus said, Jake nearly dropped his phone and his ice cream, and the world kept turning with careless ease. Rachel's thumb traced circles on the back of Daniel's hand. So what do we do now? Now? Now that we've admitted we're falling for each other, do we keep pretending this is casual? Do we have some kind of defining the relationship conversation? Do we panic and retreat for a few days to process our feelings? Her smile was shaky. I'm out of practice with this. It's been a long time since I fell for anyone. Same. And I don't think there's a rule book for our situation. Daniel glanced at their kids, then back at Rachel. But I know I don't want to retreat. I've spent 5 years retreating from everything that felt too big or too real. I'm done with that. So we move forward? We move forward, whatever that looks like. Emma chose that moment to announce she needed to use the bathroom, derailing the conversation into logistics. Rachel took her daughter inside while Daniel stayed with the boys, who were now engaged in a heated debate about whether basketball or soccer was the superior sport. They're both good, Daniel offered diplomatically. That's a cop-out answer, Jake said. You have to pick one. Why? Because neutrality is for people without opinions. Or for people who appreciate multiple things, Daniel countered. I played basketball in high school. Marcus plays soccer. Both sports taught me important things. Why does one have to be better? Jake considered this with the seriousness of a teenager confronting a philosophical dilemma. I guess that's fair, but if you had to pick one for Marcus to focus on, which would it be? Whichever one makes him happy. That's the only metric that matters. That's very dad of you, Jake said, but he was smiling. Marcus, who'd been listening while scraping the last of the melted ice cream from the bowl, looked up at Daniel. Jake's team has tryouts next month. He said I could come watch. Would that be okay? Sure. If Jake doesn't mind you being there. I don't mind, Jake said with a shrug that tried for casual but didn't quite hide his pleasure. Might be cool to have a fan who isn't my mom screaming embarrassing things from the stands. I heard that, Rachel said, returning with Emma, and I don't scream embarrassing things. I scream motivational things. Last week you yelled, "That's my beautiful baby boy," during a free throw. And you made the shot, didn't you? Jake groaned but was grinning. Emma climbed back onto the bench next to Marcus, and Rachel reclaimed her seat across from Daniel, their knees finding each other again under the table like magnets drawn together. We should probably think about dinner, Rachel said, checking her watch. It's almost 5:30. There's that pizza place on Burnside, Daniel suggested. The one with the arcade. Marcus loves it. Pizza sounds perfect. Emma will eat her weight in pepperoni if given the chance. They caravanned to Sal's Pizza Palace, a family-friendly restaurant that was exactly as chaotic as the name suggested. The arcade section flashed and beeped, children ran between tables with gleeful abandon, and harried servers navigated the chaos with practiced efficiency. They got a large booth in the back, kids on one side and adults on the other, and ordered 2 large pizzas and a pitcher of soda. While they waited for food, Marcus and Emma disappeared into the arcade with Jake trailing behind them like a reluctant guardian. Daniel watched them go, then turned to find Rachel studying him with soft eyes. What? He asked. Nothing. Just thinking about how much has changed in 2 weeks. Feels longer than 2 weeks, doesn't it? Like we've known each other for years. Rachel paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. Can I ask you something? About Sarah? Daniel felt his shoulders tense automatically, the old defensive reflex. But this was Rachel, who'd shared her own pain, who understood grief in ways most people couldn't. Yeah, go ahead. Do you still love her? The question was gentle but direct, and Daniel appreciated that she didn't dance around it. I'll always love her. She was my wife, Marcus's mother, the person I thought I'd spend my life with. That doesn't just disappear. I'm not asking if it disappears. I'm asking if it leaves room for something else. For someone else. Rachel's voice was steady, but her eyes held vulnerability. Because I need to know if I'm competing with a memory. If part of your heart will always be locked away in a place I can't reach. Daniel reached across the table and took both her hands. Sarah was my past. She'll always be part of my story, part of who Marcus and I are. But she's not my future. I spent 5 years thinking the best part of my life was over, that I'd had my chance at love and lost it. Then you showed up on my doorstep and everything shifted. He squeezed her hands. You're not competing with her memory. You're something completely different. Something new. What if I can't live up to what you had? What if you're not supposed to? What if this is its own thing, not better or worse, but just different? Daniel felt the truth of the words as he spoke them. I loved Sarah with the intensity of someone young and naive who thought love could fix anything. She got sick and I couldn't fix it, and that nearly destroyed me. But I'm not that person anymore. I'm older, scarred, carrying baggage I'll never fully set down. And maybe that's what makes this work. We're both broken in ways that fit together. Rachel's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I spent 4 years thinking I'd never trust anyone again. My ex abandoned us when we needed him most, and I decided that was it. I'd raise my kids alone, focus on survival, never let anyone close enough to hurt us like that again. She took a shaky breath. But you walked into my life already knowing the worst thing that ever happened to us. Already understanding what it means to fight for your child's life. And instead of running from our complications, you just stayed. You keep showing up. So do you. We're pretty good at showing up, huh? We've had a lot of practice. The pizza arrived, breaking the intensity of the moment. The kids returned from the arcade, Marcus and Emma arguing about who'd gotten the highest score on some racing game, while Jake settled the dispute with the authority of someone who'd long ago mastered the art of sibling mediation. They ate and laughed and argued over the last piece of pepperoni, and Daniel felt the strangeness of it all, how quickly this had started to feel normal. Natural. Right. After dinner, they stood in the parking lot under the glow of streetlights, reluctant to end the day. Emma was drooping against Rachel's side, exhausted from the combined excitement of mini golf and arcade games. Marcus was still wired, bouncing on his toes and asking if they could do this again next weekend. "We'll see," Daniel said, the automatic parent response. "That means yes," Marcus informed Emma confidently. "When parents say we'll see about something fun, it always means yes." "Not always," Rachel corrected, but she was smiling. Jake loaded into Rachel's car, already texting someone. Emma hugged Marcus goodbye, a sleepy squeeze that Marcus returned with surprising gentleness. Then she turned to Daniel and wrapped her arms around his waist. "Thank you for coming today," she murmured against his shirt. "I like when we're all together. It feels like family." Daniel's throat tightened. He crouched down to her level. "I like it too, Em. Will you come to my next soccer game? Mom gets really loud and it's embarrassing, but it's less embarrassing if other people are there too." "I'll be there. I promise." Emma beamed and climbed into the car. Rachel lingered, close enough that Daniel could smell her perfume again, something that was becoming familiar, comforting. "Thank you for today," she said. "For being honest. For not running. Thank you for the same." They stood there for a moment that stretched longer than it should have, both aware that their kids were watching from their respective cars. Finally, Rachel rose on her toes and kissed his cheek, quick and soft. "I'll call you tomorrow," she whispered. "I'll be waiting." Daniel watched her drive away, then got into his own car where Marcus was watching him with knowing eyes. "You kissed," Marcus observed. "She kissed my cheek." "That's not the same as kissing." "But you wanted to actually kiss her, I could tell." "When did you become such an expert on adult relationships?" "I'm very observant. We've established this." Marcus buckled his seatbelt. "I like them, Dad. Emma and Jake and Rachel. I like how they make you smile more. I like how you're not so sad all the time." Daniel pulled out of the parking lot, blinking hard against the sudden sting of tears. "I didn't know you noticed that, the sadness." "I always noticed. I just didn't know how to make it better." Marcus's voice was small. "But Rachel makes it better. Emma makes it better. So I'm glad they're here." "Me too, bud. Me too." The following weeks fell into a rhythm that felt both new and inevitable. Soccer games on weekends where both families cheered from the same section of bleachers. Dinners that rotated between their houses. Marcus and Emma doing homework at kitchen tables while the adults cooked. Jake's basketball games where Emma and Marcus sat with Daniel and Rachel, learning the rules and shouting encouragement at questionable moments. They were building something, Daniel realized. Not just a relationship between him and Rachel, but a connection between their families. The kids had sleepovers. Emma at Daniel's house one weekend, Marcus at Rachel's the next. Jake started stopping by Daniel's office occasionally after school, ostensibly to use the architectural software for a project, but really just to hang out and talk about college plans and whether he'd get a basketball scholarship. "You don't have to do this," Jake said one afternoon, sitting in Daniel's office and spinning in the spare chair. "The whole mentor thing. I know you're dating my mom, but you don't have to be my dad or whatever." Daniel looked up from the blueprint he'd been reviewing. "I'm not trying to be your dad, but I do care about you. And if you need someone to talk to or help with stuff, I'm here. No strings attached." Jake studied him for a long moment. My real dad sends me money sometimes. Birthday cards, texts on holidays, but he hasn't seen Emma or me in 3 years. When she was sick, when she could have died, he couldn't handle it, just left. His voice was matter-of-fact, but his eyes held old hurt. So I don't really trust men who say they'll be there. Because the one who was supposed to be there wasn't. That's fair, Daniel said. And I can't promise I'll be perfect or never let you down. But I can promise I'll try. And I won't bail just because things get hard. I've already been through the hardest thing, Jake. I know what it's like to watch someone you love suffer and not be able to fix it. And I didn't run. Because you couldn't. She was your wife. I could have emotionally checked out. Lots of people do. I could have gone through the motions without being present. But I chose to stay fully there, fully present, even when it was destroying me. Daniel set down his pencil. Your dad made a choice too. A different one. And that's on him, not on you or Emma or your mom. That's his failure, not yours. Jake blinked hard, fighting tears he refused to let fall. My mom really likes you, really likes you. Emma won't shut up about you, and he struggled for words. I don't want you to hurt them. They've been hurt enough. I don't want to hurt them either. But what if you do? What if this doesn't work out, and you leave, and Emma loses her cell buddy, and my mom goes back to being sad all the time? It was the fear Daniel had been carrying too, unspoken, but constant. I can't promise we'll work out forever. Nobody can promise that. But I can promise I'm serious about this. About your mom. About you guys. About trying to build something real. And if it doesn't work out, I won't just disappear. We'd figure out how to do it right, how to minimize the hurt. That's a very adult answer. I'm a very adult person. Jake almost smiled. You're okay, Mr. Brooks. For a guy dating my mom. You're okay too, Jake. For a 14-year-old with trust issues. This time, Jake did smile. Can you show me how to use the 3D modeling software? I have this project due next week, and I'm supposed to design a dream house. They spent the next hour working on Jake's project, Daniel teaching him the basics, while Jake proved to be a surprisingly quick study. By the time Rachel came to pick him up, Jake had designed an elaborate modern house with floor-to-ceiling windows and a basketball court in the backyard. That's amazing, Rachel said, looking over her son's shoulder at the computer screen. When did you become an architect? About an hour ago. Mr. Brooks is a good teacher. Mr. Brooks has a name, Daniel said. You can call me Daniel if you want. The Mr. Brooks thing makes me feel ancient. Jake considered this. Daniel works. Mr. Brooks sounds like you're my teacher or something. Which you're definitely not, Rachel added, kissing Daniel's cheek. Teachers have weekends off. After they left, Daniel sat in his quiet office and let himself feel the weight of what was happening. Jake was starting to trust him. The kids were bonding. He and Rachel were navigating the complicated dance of blending families with surprising grace. Everything was moving in the right direction. So why did Daniel feel like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop? The answer came 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday evening in early April. Daniel was at Rachel's house helping make dinner while the kids did homework in the living room. They'd fallen into this routine, Daniel leaving work early on Tuesdays, stopping by with groceries, cooking together while they talked about their days. It was domestic and comfortable and everything Daniel had thought he'd lost forever. Rachel's phone rang while she was chopping vegetables. She glanced at the screen and her entire body went rigid. I need to take this, she said, her voice tight. Can you watch the stove? She disappeared into her bedroom, closing the door. Daniel stirred the sauce and tried not to eavesdrop, but the walls were thin and Rachel's voice carried, growing louder and sharper with each sentence. No, you can't just show up after 3 years. I don't care what your reasons are. They've moved on, Derek. We've all moved on. You lost that right when you walked out. Derek, her ex-husband, the man who'd abandoned Emma and Jake when they needed him most. Daniel's stomach dropped. The kids had gone quiet in the living room, clearly hearing their mother's side of the conversation. He moved to the doorway and saw Jake's face, closed off and hard. Emma looked scared. Is that Dad? Emma whispered. Sounds like it, Jake said flatly. Rachel emerged from the bedroom 10 minutes later, her face pale and her hands shaking. She saw the kids watching her and forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Everything's fine, just an unexpected call. Who wants to set the table? What did Dad want? Jake's voice was challenging. We'll talk about it after dinner. I want to talk about it now. Rachel glanced at Daniel, and he could see the apology in her eyes. Sorry you're witnessing this. Sorry it's happening at all. Sorry for dragging you into our mess. He gave her a small nod meant to convey, it's okay, I'm here. We'll handle this together. Your father is moving back to Portland, Rachel said carefully. He wants to reconnect with you both. See you regularly. Emma's face lit up with hope that broke Daniel's heart. Really? Dad's coming back? He's not coming back to our family, Emma. He just wants to see you and your brother sometimes. When? Emma was already off the couch. Can we see him this weekend? Can he come to my soccer game? We'll see. I need to talk to him more about what this looks like. There are complications. Jake hadn't moved. He left us. Why would we want to see him? Because he's still your father, Rachel said quietly. And whatever happened between him and me, that doesn't change the fact that he's your dad. Except it does. Jake's voice was sharp with anger. He left when Emma was dying. He left when we needed him. He doesn't get to just come back now that everything's fine and pretend it didn't happen. Jake, I don't want to see him. I don't care if he's back in Portland or on Mars. He stopped being my dad the day he walked out. Jake grabbed his backpack. I'm going to Tyler's house. I'll be back later. He was gone before Rachel could respond, the front door slamming behind him. Emma stood in the middle of the living room, tears streaming down her face. Is Jake right? Is Dad not our dad anymore? Rachel pulled her daughter into a hug. He'll always be your dad, sweetie, but sometimes relationships are complicated. Sometimes people make mistakes that are hard to forgive. But he's coming back. That means he's sorry, right? That means he wants to be our dad again. I don't know what it means yet, but we'll figure it out together, okay? Emma nodded against her mother's shoulder, but Daniel could see she was still crying. He felt helpless, standing there in someone else's kitchen while their family drama unfolded. This wasn't his place. These weren't his kids. But Rachel looked at him over Emma's head with such raw need that he couldn't just leave. Dinner was quiet and strained. Emma picked at her food and asked questions Rachel answered with careful neutrality. Daniel mostly stayed silent, unsure of his role in this conversation. After Emma went to her room to read, Rachel sank into the couch and put her face in her hands. I'm sorry, she said, her voice muffled. You didn't sign up for this. Daniel sat beside her and pulled her against his chest. Yes, I did. When I said I was serious about you, about your family, this was part of the package. Derek showing up out of nowhere was not part of any package. Okay, fine. But dealing with complications together was definitely part of it. He kissed the top of her head. Talk to me. What's really going on? Rachel took a shaky breath. He called 3 weeks ago. I didn't tell you because I didn't think it would amount to anything. He said he was moving back to Portland for a job, that he wanted to see the kids, that he'd been in therapy and realized he'd made a mistake leaving. I told him he couldn't just waltz back into their lives after 3 years of nothing but birthday cards and guilt money. What did he say? He said he knew he'd screwed up, but he wanted a chance to make it right. That Emma and Jake deserved to have their father in their lives. Rachel's laugh was bitter. And legally, he's right. He has visitation rights. I can't keep them from him unless I can prove he's a danger, which he's not. He's just a coward who ran when things got hard. What do you want to do? I want to protect my kids. Jake is old enough to decide for himself, and he's made his position clear, but Emma, Rachel's voice broke. Emma still wants her daddy. She's 9 years old, and she doesn't understand why he left, doesn't understand that people who are supposed to love you can just abandon you. She thinks he came back because he loves her. Maybe he does love her, in his own screwed-up way. Love means staying. Love means showing up even when it's hard, even when you're scared, even when you don't know what to do. Derek doesn't know how to love like that. He only knows how to love when it's easy. Daniel held her while she cried, feeling the weight of a situation he had no power to fix. This was her past intruding on their present, complicated and messy, in ways that made his own grief feel simple by comparison. At least Sarah had died. At least there was finality to their ending. Rachel had to navigate the ongoing presence of someone who'd hurt her family, who still had legal rights and emotional claims despite his abandonment. When Rachel's phone buzzed with a text from Jake saying he'd be staying at Tyler's house for the night, Daniel made a decision. "I'm staying," he said. "Tonight. On the couch or wherever, but I'm not leaving you to deal with this alone." "Daniel, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." He pulled back to look at her. "I told Jake I wouldn't run when things got hard. I'm telling you the same thing. This is hard, and I'm staying anyway." Rachel's eyes filled with fresh tears. "Why are you so good?" "I'm not good. I'm just here. There's a difference." He called his mother-in-law to check on Marcus, who was having dinner at her place. Joan's voice was warm and knowing when he explained he'd be staying at Rachel's. "Good," she said simply. "That woman needs someone who doesn't run. Be that person, Daniel." "I'm trying." "You're doing more than trying. Sarah would be proud of you." The words settled into his chest, warm and painful at once. He spent the night on Rachel's couch, though sleep was elusive. Around 2 a.m, Rachel appeared in the doorway of the living room, silhouetted by the hallway light. "Can't sleep?" Daniel asked quietly. "Too many thoughts." She crossed to the couch and curled up against him, pulling the blanket over both of them. "Thank you for staying. Where else would I be?" They lay there in the darkness, listening to the house settle around them, both aware that something had shifted. Derek's return was a complication they'd have to navigate, a test of whether what they were building could withstand external pressure. Daniel thought about Jake's question from weeks ago. What if this doesn't work out and you leave? He tightened his arms around Rachel and made a silent promise to her, to himself, to the fragile thing they were building together. He wouldn't be like Derek. He wouldn't run when things got complicated. He'd made a choice 5 years ago to give part of himself to save a stranger's child, a choice born from grief and desperation. And that choice had led him here, to this woman and this family and this moment where staying mattered more than anything. "We'll figure this out," he whispered into her hair. "Whatever Derek wants, whatever happens, we'll handle it together. Promise?" "I promise." Rachel's breathing eventually evened out into sleep, but Daniel lay awake for hours, holding her close and watching the shadows move across the ceiling. The universe had brought them together through impossible circumstances, had given him a second chance at love he'd never expected to find. He wasn't going to let Derek or fear or the weight of their complicated histories destroy that. Morning would come with its challenges and decisions. Jake would return home angry and hurt. Emma would ask more questions about when she could see her father. Rachel would have to navigate the legal and emotional minefield of co-parenting with a man who'd forfeited his right to that role years ago. But for now, in the quiet darkness, Daniel held Rachel and let himself believe they were strong enough to weather whatever storm was coming. They'd both survived worse. They'd both rebuilt themselves from nothing. And maybe that was exactly what made them capable of this. Two broken people who understood that love wasn't about perfection or easy answers. It was about showing up, staying present, and choosing each other even when the universe threw complications in their path. The first light of dawn was creeping through the windows when Rachel stirred against him. "What time is it?" she murmured. "Almost 6. Marcus is probably wondering where I am." "You should go. I need to talk to Emma before school anyway." But neither of them moved, reluctant to let go of the peace they'd found in the darkness. Finally, Rachel sat up and Daniel did the same, both of them rumpled and exhausted and facing a day that would be harder than yesterday. "For what it's worth," Daniel said, standing and folding the blanket, "I think you're an incredible mother. However you decide to handle Derek, whatever you think is best for Emma and Jake, I trust your judgment, and I'm here to support whatever you need." Rachel stood and wrapped her arms around him, holding on like he was an anchor in rough seas. "I don't know what I did to deserve you showing up in my life, but I'm grateful every single day." The feeling is mutual. He kissed her forehead and left, driving through empty streets toward his own house and his own son and the life that was becoming increasingly entangled with Rachel's. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together. And somehow, that made even Derek's return feel manageable. Marcus was eating cereal at the kitchen table when Daniel walked through the door at 6:30, still wearing yesterday's clothes and carrying the weight of a sleepless night on his face. His son looked up, assessed the situation with the frightening perceptiveness of children who'd learned to read their parents' moods, and simply said, "Is Rachel okay?" Daniel poured himself coffee before answering. "She's dealing with some complicated stuff. Her ex-husband is moving back to Portland and wants to see the kids." "The dad who left when Emma was sick?" "Yeah, that one." Marcus pushed his cereal around the bowl thoughtfully. "That's bad, right? Because he hurt them and now he wants to come back?" "It's complicated. He's still their father, so legally he has rights. But emotionally, it's a mess. Jake doesn't want to see him at all. Emma does because she's younger and doesn't fully understand what happened. What about Rachel? What does she want?" Daniel sat down across from his son. "She wants to protect her kids, make sure they don't get hurt again, but she also knows she can't control everything, and that's terrifying for a parent." Marcus considered this with the gravity of someone twice his age. "Are you going to help her?" "I'm going to try, if she'll let me." "She'll let you. She trusts you." Marcus took another bite of cereal. "So do Emma and Jake. Even Jake, and he doesn't trust anybody." "How do you know that?" "Because he told me. When we were shooting hoops last week, he said you're the first adult besides his mom who actually listens when he talks, instead of just pretending to care." Daniel felt something warm and painful expand in his chest. "He said that?" "Yeah. And then he said if I told anyone he said something nice, he'd deny it and make me look stupid. So don't mention it." Marcus grinned. "But I figured you should know." They finished breakfast in comfortable silence. Then Daniel drove Marcus to school before heading to his office. Work was a welcome distraction, a community center project that required his full attention, meetings with contractors, blueprints that needed revising. But his mind kept drifting to Rachel, to the conversation she was probably having with Emma about Derek, to Jake's anger and hurt that reminded Daniel too much of his own rage in the months after Sarah died. His phone buzzed around noon, a text from Rachel. "Derek wants to meet Emma this Saturday. Just coffee, supervised by me. I told him Jake isn't ready. Am I doing this wrong?" Daniel called her instead of texting back. She answered on the first ring. "Tell me I'm not making a mistake," she said without preamble. "You're not making a mistake. You're making the best decision you can with impossible options." "It feels like a betrayal. Of everything we went through, everything the kid suffered while he was absent. But keeping Emma from her father when she wants to see him would feel like a different kind of betrayal. To her." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "You're in a no-win situation, Rachel. Whatever you choose, someone gets hurt. So you're choosing the option that hurts the least in the long run." "What if he disappoints her? What if he shows up Saturday and then disappears again?" "Then you'll be there to pick up the pieces, like you've been doing for 5 years. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. "I'm scared, Daniel. Not for me. I'm over him. Over the anger and hurt, but I'm scared for Emma. She's built up this fantasy of her father coming back and everything being perfect. Reality is going to crush that, and I don't know how to protect her from it." "You can't protect her from it. You can only be there when it happens." Daniel paused. "Do you want me there? On Saturday?" "I can come with you, stay in the background, just be present if you need backup." "You do that?" "Rachel, I'd do anything for you. I thought we'd established that." He heard her take a shaky breath. "Okay, yes. I want you there, not sitting with us. That would be too weird. But nearby, in case everything falls apart. I'll be there." Saturday arrived with deceptive sunshine, the kind of perfect spring day that felt at odds with the tension thrumming through Daniel's body. He picked up Marcus early and explained the situation. They were going to the coffee shop where Rachel was meeting Derek, not to interfere, but just to be available if needed. "So we're like backup?" Marcus asked, eyes wide. "Exactly like backup." "Cool. I've never been backup before." They arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early and claimed a table in the corner with a clear view of the entrance. Marcus brought a book and his handheld game console, prepared to entertain himself. Daniel ordered coffee he didn't drink and watched the door with mounting anxiety. Rachel arrived at 2 o'clock with Emma, who was dressed in her favorite purple dress and had clearly spent extra time on her hair. Even from across the room, Daniel could see the hope and nervousness radiating from the 9-year-old. Rachel spotted Daniel immediately and gave him a small, grateful smile before guiding Emma to a table by the window. Derek showed up 10 minutes late. Daniel recognized him from photos he'd seen at Rachel's house. Tall, conventionally handsome, wearing an expensive suit that screamed recent success. He carried flowers, which Emma accepted with shy delight. Rachel's expression was carefully neutral, but Daniel could see the tension in her shoulders. "Is that Emma's dad?" Marcus whispered. "Yeah. He looks like a person who's trying really hard to look like a good person." Daniel almost laughed despite the situation. "That's surprisingly perceptive." "I'm full of surprises." They watched the meeting unfold from a distance. Emma did most of the talking, animated and bright, clearly trying to fill the awkward silences. Derek nodded a lot, smiled at appropriate moments, but even from across the room, Daniel could see the discomfort in his posture. This was a man fulfilling an obligation, not connecting with his daughter. Rachel sat rigid beside Emma, hands wrapped around a coffee cup she never drank from, clearly ready to intervene at any moment. 30 minutes in, Emma got up to use the bathroom. The second she was gone, Derek leaned toward Rachel and said something that made her face go hard. Daniel saw her respond, sharp and quick, saw Derek's expression shift to defensive anger. When Emma returned, the energy at the table had changed, brittle and false, everyone pretending the tension wasn't suffocating. The meeting lasted exactly 1 hour. Derek left first, giving Emma an awkward half-hug and promising to call soon. The second he was gone, Emma's smile crumbled. She sat back down and burst into tears while Rachel gathered her close, shooting Daniel a look that said, "We're leaving now. Follow us." They caravanned back to Rachel's house. Daniel and Marcus followed Rachel and Emma inside to find Jake in the living room, clearly having heard his sister crying from the moment they entered. "What happened?" Jake demanded. "What did he do?" "He didn't do anything," Rachel said carefully. "It was just hard, emotional." "Did he make you cry, Em?" Jake's voice was sharp with protective anger. Emma shook her head, still sobbing. "He was nice. He brought me flowers. He asked about school and soccer, but..." She struggled to articulate what 9-year-olds shouldn't have to understand. "But it felt like he was talking to a stranger, like he didn't actually know me. Because he doesn't. He doesn't know anything about me anymore." Rachel held her daughter while she cried, and Daniel saw the moment Jake's anger transformed into something deeper. Grief for the father he'd already mourned, rage on behalf of his sister who was mourning him now. "I told you," Jake said to Rachel. "I told you he'd hurt her." "Jake, no. You let him come back, and now Emma's crying. And for what? So he could feel less guilty about abandoning us?" Jake grabbed his basketball. "I'm going to the park." He was gone before anyone could respond. Marcus, who'd been standing quietly by the door, looked at Daniel with worried eyes. "Should I go after him?" "Give him a few minutes," Daniel said. "Sometimes people need to be angry alone before they can talk about it." Emma's sobs eventually quieted into hiccuping breaths. Rachel carried her to the couch and wrapped her in a blanket, then turned to Daniel with exhausted eyes. "Coffee?" he offered. "Something stronger would be better, but coffee will do." In the kitchen, while Marcus sat with Emma and tried to distract her with a game on his console, Rachel collapsed into a chair and put her head in her hands. "He told me he's dating someone," she said dully. "When Emma went to the bathroom, said he wanted me to know before I heard it from the kids, like he's doing me some kind of favor." Daniel set down the coffee pot. "He's dating someone and wants back into Emma and Jake's lives? He says they're separate things, that he can have a relationship and still be a father, which is technically true, but..." Rachel lifted her head. "He told Emma about her, about his girlfriend. Said maybe Emma could meet her sometime, like they could all be one big happy family. And Emma asked if that meant we'd all be together again. And he had to explain that no, he'd be with his girlfriend, but Emma could visit them. He's an idiot. He's worse than an idiot. He's selfish. He came back because his therapist probably told him to, or because his new girlfriend thinks it's romantic that he's trying to reconnect with his kids, or because he needs to feel like he's not the bad guy in this story. But he doesn't actually want the hard work of being a father. He wants the Instagram version, coffee dates and flowers and looking like parent of the year without any of the actual parenting." Daniel poured 2 cups of coffee and sat down across from her. "So what are you going to do?" "I don't know." Emma wants to see him again because she still has hope he'll become the father she needs. But every time she sees him and realizes he's not that person, it's going to break her heart a little more. Rachel wrapped her hands around the mug. Maybe I should just tell him to stay away. Tell him he lost his chance and he doesn't get to come back now. Can you do that legally? Probably not without a custody fight I don't have the energy or money for. But maybe if I tell him how much he's hurting Emma, he'll make the choice himself. Or maybe he'll keep showing up sporadically, doing exactly enough to ease his guilt without actually being present. Rachel's laugh was bitter. That's what I'm afraid of. The back door opened and Jake came in, sweaty and still angry but slightly calmer. He looked at the adults, then at his sister on the couch, and his expression softened. Is she okay? He asked quietly. She will be, Rachel said. She just needs time. Jake crossed to the couch and sat next to Emma, pulling her against his side in the protective way older brothers did. Marcus scooted over to make room, and the three kids sat together in companionable silence while Daniel and Rachel watched from the kitchen. We should order dinner, Daniel said. Something easy. Pizza, maybe? You don't have to stay. This isn't your mess to clean up. Rachel. Daniel took her hand across the table. When are you going to understand that your mess is my mess now? That I'm not going anywhere? Her eyes filled with tears. I keep waiting for you to realize we're too complicated. Too much baggage. Too much drama. Everyone has baggage. Yours just happens to include an ex-husband who's a coward and two incredible kids who've been through hell and survived. That doesn't scare me. If anything, it makes me more certain that you're exactly who I want to be with. Why? Because you didn't run when things got hard. You stayed and fought and protected your kids and rebuilt your life. That's not baggage, Rachel. That's strength. That's exactly the kind of person I want in my life, in Marcus's life. Rachel stood up and came around the table, and Daniel pulled her into his lap. She wrapped her arms around his neck and held on while he rubbed her back in slow circles. I love you, she whispered. I'm falling in love with you, and it terrifies me because everyone I've loved has either died or left, and I don't know if I can survive losing someone else. Daniel's heart hammered against his ribs. Love. She'd said it. The word he'd been feeling but hadn't dared speak, afraid it was too soon, too much, too everything. I love you too, he said against her hair, and I can't promise I'll never die. None of us can. But I can promise I'll never leave. Not by choice. Not because things are hard. I'm here, Rachel, for as long as you'll have me. She pulled back to look at him, tears streaming down her face. Forever. I want you here forever. Then forever it is. They kissed, slow and deep and full of promises they both intended to keep. When they broke apart, Daniel realized three kids were watching them from the couch with varying expressions. Emma delighted, Marcus grinning, Jake trying to look disgusted but failing to hide his smile. Gross, Jake announced. There are children present. You're 14, Rachel said, hardly a child. I'm traumatized nonetheless. You'll survive, Daniel said. Now who wants pizza? The unanimous answer was everyone. They ordered 3 large pizzas and spent the evening in Rachel's living room, eating and watching a movie Emma chose. Derek wasn't mentioned again that night, though his presence lingered like smoke in the corners of the room. But surrounded by the people who mattered, the ones who stayed, who showed up, who chose love over comfort, the damage he'd caused felt manageable. Over the next few weeks, Derek called Emma a few times, but never followed through on his promises to visit again. Each broken promise hurt less than the one before, as Emma slowly began to understand what Daniel and Rachel and Jake had known all along. Her father was never going to be the person she needed him to be. It was a hard lesson for a 9-year-old to learn, but she had a mother who loved her fiercely, and a brother who would protect her always, and a man who'd saved her life and was now becoming part of her family in ways that mattered more than biology. One Saturday in May, exactly 2 months after that first blind date that wasn't really a date, Daniel stood in his kitchen making breakfast while Marcus set the table. They were expecting Rachel and her kids for brunch, a weekly tradition that had developed naturally. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 o'clock, and Marcus ran to answer it. Emma burst through first, carrying a poster board. I made something for you, she announced to Daniel. He He wiped his hands and crouched down to see what she'd created. It was a family tree, carefully drawn with markers and decorated with stickers. At the top were two branches, one labeled Brooks family, with Daniel and Marcus, the other labeled Miller family, with Rachel, Jake, and Emma. But the branches intertwined in the middle, connected by a heart. And beneath it, Emma had written in careful letters, "Our family." Daniel felt his throat close. "Emma, this is beautiful. It's for your refrigerator, so everyone knows we're family now." She looked up at him with serious eyes. "We are family, right? Even though you and Mom aren't married or anything?" Daniel glanced at Rachel, who was watching from the doorway with soft eyes. Marcus appeared at his elbow, studying the poster. "That's us," Marcus said with satisfaction. "All of us together." "Yeah," Jake added from behind them. "All of us together. It's weird, but it works." They hung the poster on the refrigerator, right next to Emma's original drawing of her cell buddy Angel. Daniel stepped back and looked at the two pieces of art. One created 5 years ago by a sick child imagining her savior, the other created now by that same child, healthy and whole, and envisioning a family that was choosing itself rather than being bound by blood alone. "I've been thinking," Rachel said later when the kids were playing in the backyard and she and Daniel had a moment alone in the kitchen. "About the future. About us." "Yeah?" "Emma asked me last night when you and Marcus were going to move in. She said it's silly that we have two houses when we're always together anyway." Daniel's pulse quickened. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that was a decision you and I would have to make together. That moving in together is a big step, and we need to make sure everyone's ready for it." Rachel paused. "So I'm asking, are you ready for it? Because I think I am. I think we all are." Daniel looked out the window at their children. Marcus and Emma playing catch while Jake practiced dribbling a basketball, all three of them laughing and comfortable in each other's presence. He thought about the empty spaces in his house, the rooms that had felt too big and too quiet for 5 years. He thought about Rachel's house, always full of noise and life and the beautiful chaos of a family choosing joy despite the grief they'd survived. "I'm ready," he said. "More than ready." Rachel's smile could have lit the entire city. "Yeah? Yeah, let's do this. Let's make it official." They told the kids that afternoon, all 5 of them sitting around Rachel's dining table. Emma shrieked with joy and immediately started planning where her and Marcus's rooms would be. Marcus wanted to know if they'd get a dog now that they'd have more people to help take care of it. Jake, who'd been quiet through the announcement, finally spoke up. "Can I still call you Daniel, or do I have to call you something else?" Daniel understood the weight behind the question. Jake wasn't asking about names. He was asking about roles, about whether Daniel was trying to replace the father who'd abandoned him. "You can call me whatever feels right to you," Daniel said. "I'm not trying to be your dad, Jake. You had one of those, and he failed you. I'm just trying to be someone who shows up, who stays, who's here for you and Emma and your mom no matter what." Jake nodded slowly. "Daniel works. Daniel's good." He paused. "But for the record, you're way better at the whole dad thing than my actual dad ever was, even if you won't admit you're doing it." "I'll take that as a compliment." "You should. It's the nicest thing I've said to anyone in months." They spent the rest of the afternoon making plans, logistics about which house to live in, how to merge their belongings, when to make the move. They decided on Daniel's house, which was slightly larger and had a better backyard. Emma and Marcus would share the bonus room converted into a gaming space, Jake would get the largest bedroom, and Rachel and Daniel would finally stop pretending they weren't already functioning as a couple. The actual move happened gradually over the summer. Boxes were packed and unpacked, furniture was rearranged, 2 households became one with surprising ease. There were adjustments. Jake needed his space and could be territorial about his things. Emma was used to being the center of attention and had to learn to share. Marcus struggled sometimes with the loss of his father's son, only time with Daniel. But they navigated each challenge together, learning each other's rhythms and routines, becoming a family not through force but through countless small choices to stay and try and choose each other daily. One evening in late August, Daniel stood in his backyard, their backyard now, watching his transformed family. Rachel was at the grill teaching Jake how to flip burgers without burning them. Marcus and Emma were setting up badminton, arguing good-naturedly about net height. The radio played music nobody was really listening to. It was ordinary and perfect, and everything Daniel had thought he'd lost forever when Sarah died. "You look contemplative," Rachel said, appearing at his elbow and handing him a beer. "Just thinking about how different everything is from a year ago." "Good different?" "The best different." He wrapped his arm around her waist. "A year ago I was going through the motions, existing but not really living, taking care of Marcus but not taking care of myself. And now," he gestured at the scene before them, "now I have this, us, a family I never expected. We're pretty great, aren't we? You're spectacular, all of you." Rachel leaned her head against his shoulder. "I still think about that day you opened your door, how I almost didn't come, how I almost talked myself out of it because what were the odds you'd actually be Emma's donor? And then I saw those scars on your wrist and I just knew. And I thought, this is either going to be the most beautiful coincidence of my life or the most awkward coffee date in history. Turned out to be both. True, but mostly the beautiful coincidence part. Emma called them over to start the badminton tournament she'd organized with elaborate rules that changed every 5 minutes. They played until dark, teams rotating, everyone cheating cheerfully and accusing everyone else of the same. When they finally went inside, sweaty and laughing, Marcus pulled Daniel aside. "Hey, Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you going to marry Rachel?" The question didn't surprise Daniel. He'd been thinking about it himself for weeks. "Would you be okay with that if I did?" Marcus didn't even hesitate. "Yeah, I like her. I like Jake and Emma. I like us all being together, and I think Mom would like Rachel too. I think she'd be happy you found someone who makes you smile again." Daniel pulled his son into a hug, overwhelmed by the wisdom and grace of this 8-year-old who'd lost his mother too young, but hadn't let that loss make him bitter or afraid. "I think your mom would like her too." "So you're going to ask her?" "Eventually, when the time is right." "The time is always right when you love someone. That's what Grandma Joan says." "Grandma Joan says a lot of things, but she's usually right about the important stuff." That night, after the kids were in bed, Daniel and Rachel sat on the back porch with wine and the comfortable silence of people who didn't need to fill every moment with words. The summer air was warm and thick with the smell of cut grass and the distant sound of neighbors' conversations drifting across fences. "Marcus asked me today if I was going to marry you," Daniel said. Rachel's hand tightened around her wine glass. "What did you tell him?" "That I was thinking about it." "And? Are you thinking about it?" Daniel set down his wine and turned to face her fully. "I've been thinking about it since the day at the mini golf course when I told you I was falling for you. I've been thinking about it every morning when I wake up next to you and every night when we put the kids to bed together. I've been thinking about it during Jake's basketball games and Emma's soccer matches and every ordinary Tuesday when we make dinner and do homework and exist as a family." "Daniel, I don't have a ring. I didn't plan this speech. But I'm sitting here looking at you and thinking about how 5 years ago I made a decision in grief that I never expected to matter beyond that one moment. And that decision brought you into my life, brought Emma and Jake into my life, gave me a second chance I didn't know I needed." He took her hands. "So yes, I'm thinking about marrying you. I'm thinking I want to make this official, make you and your kids officially mine, make us officially a family in every legal and binding way possible." Rachel was crying now, tears catching the porch light. "Is this a proposal?" "It's a terrible proposal, but yes. Rachel Miller, will you marry me?" "Yes. 1,000 times yes." They kissed under the stars while their children slept inside. Two broken people who'd found each other through impossible circumstances and decided that broken pieces could fit together into something whole and beautiful. When they broke apart, Rachel was laughing through her tears. "The kids are going to lose their minds when we tell them. Emma's probably going to plan the entire wedding in a day. Jake's going to pretend he doesn't care but secretly be thrilled. Marcus is going to tell everyone at school his dad's getting married and make it sound way more dramatic than it is." They sat together in the darkness, making plans and dreaming about a future that felt secure for the first time in years. The next morning, they told the kids at breakfast. Emma screamed so loud the neighbors probably heard. Marcus spilled orange juice in his excitement. Jake hugged his mother with rare open emotion, then gave Daniel a fist bump that communicated everything words couldn't. "Can I be in the wedding?" Emma asked immediately. "You'll all be in the wedding," Rachel said. "This is about all of us becoming a family officially." "We're already a family," Jake pointed out. "This just makes it legal." Exactly. They got married 3 months later in a small ceremony in their backyard, surrounded by close friends and family. Emma and Marcus stood beside their parents, holding rings and trying not to fidget. Jake read a poem he'd written about second chances and choosing family. Daniel's mother-in-law Joan gave Rachel a hug and whispered something that made Rachel cry happy tears. Dave stood as Daniel's best man and gave a speech about friendship and fate and the strange beauty of a blind date that became so much more. When Daniel kissed his bride, their children cheered. When Rachel kissed her husband, she was kissing the man who'd saved her daughter's life 5 years before either of them knew they'd need each other. When they turned to face their family and friends as husband and wife, Daniel felt Sarah's presence like a blessing rather than a ghost. Approval and love, and the sense that she'd somehow known he'd find his way through the darkness into this light. The reception lasted into the evening, music and laughter and dancing under string lights. At some point, Daniel found himself standing with Jake and Marcus, watching Rachel dance with Emma. "You did good, Daniel," Jake said quietly. "Taking us on, making us yours. You guys made it easy. We're a mess, we both know it, but you didn't run. That matters. I told you I wouldn't. I meant it." Marcus tugged on Daniel's sleeve. "Dad? Can we do the family dance now? The one Emma planned?" Daniel laughed and let himself be pulled onto the makeshift dance floor where Rachel and Emma waited. Jake followed reluctantly but willingly. They danced together as a family, awkward and uncoordinated and perfect, surrounded by people who loved them and supported them and had watched them become this unit that chose each other daily. Later, when the party had wound down and the kids were asleep in their rooms and the house was quiet, Daniel and Rachel stood in their bedroom, the room that was now officially theirs, not his or hers, but theirs, and looked at each other with the wonder of people who'd survived the impossible and found joy on the other side. "We did it," Rachel said softly. "We did. We're married. We're a family. This is real. It's been real for a while now. Today just made it official." Rachel wrapped her arms around his waist and rested her head on his chest. "I love you, Daniel Brooks. I love you, Rachel Brooks." They stood there swaying slightly, dancing to music only they could hear. Through the window, the moon illuminated their backyard where, just hours ago, they'd promised forever. In the rooms down the hall, 3 children slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and chosen and safe. And somewhere, in whatever place existed beyond this life, Daniel hoped Sarah and all the people they'd lost were watching and approving and understanding that love wasn't finite, that hearts could break and heal and break again and still find the courage to stay open. 5 years ago, Daniel had sat in a clinic chair and given part of himself to save a stranger's child. He'd done it because he was drowning in grief and needed to believe the world wasn't entirely cruel, that some good could come from unspeakable loss. He never expected that choice to circle back, to bring him a woman who understood his scars and children who needed what he had to give, and a family that felt like destiny disguised as coincidence. But standing there with his wife in their bedroom, listening to the quiet breathing of their sleeping children, Daniel understood something fundamental about the universe and its strange sense of timing. Every decision mattered. Every choice echoed forward in ways impossible to predict. One act of kindness, one moment of choosing light over darkness, could bloom into a future more beautiful than anything imagined. Emma had been right all those years ago when she'd drawn her cell buddy with wings. Not because Daniel was an angel, but because sometimes humans did angelic things without meaning to, without expecting recognition or reward. And sometimes those things saved more than one life. They saved families. They saved futures. They created possibilities where none had existed before. Daniel held his wife and thought about the poster on the refrigerator downstairs, the one showing 2 families intertwined into one. He thought about Marcus learning to share his father without resentment, about Emma healing from her father's abandonment by learning what real presence looked like, about Jake slowly lowering his defenses and accepting that not all men would leave, about Rachel trusting again after betrayal, loving again after loss, choosing hope over fear daily. They'd all been broken in different ways, but they'd chosen to be broken together, to let their fractured pieces create something new and whole and stronger than any of them had been alone. That was the real miracle, not the impossible odds of donor and recipient finding each other, but the daily choice to stay, to love, to build a family from the ruins of what they'd lost. Morning would come with its routines and chaos. Marcus would fight with Emma over bathroom time. Jake would sleep through his alarm and have to be woken 3 times. Rachel would make too much coffee and Daniel would burn the toast. They'd navigate the beautiful mess of their blended life with humor and patience and occasional frustration. But they'd do it together, all of them. The family that chance had created and choice had cemented. The Brooks family, expanded and transformed and exactly where they were supposed to be. And somewhere in the universe, Daniel imagined, Sarah was smiling.